Of the learning series Salesforce for Developers. I am Batmasegar Damodaran, leader of Chennai Salesforce Trailblazer community. Thank you everyone for making this virtual learning series as a successful one. Today we have 4 people will engage you. The first one is Mr. Andy Giri. Andy Giri is the founder and CEO of SoftSquare. SoftSquare is a Salesforce Silver partner, and they are doing Salesforce practice for the last 12 years. And Mr. Velu Palani. Velu Palani is a Senior Director of Salesforce Applications and Head of COE at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. He is the leader of Chicago Salesforce Developer Group. These two people will have a fireside chat. This chat will be happening after the break. And we have 2 other presenters, Praveen and Yashwant. They are much familiar with you participants, and they are working as technical leads in SoftSquare. They are working for around 5+ years of experience. They are experts in Salesforce Lightning development. And this last day, I want to show you something regarding Salesforce certification preparation. After the training is over, you may prepare for your certification, that is Platform Developer 1. Salesforce is providing something called certification days. This program they are conducting for every month. I will show you. If you search for certification days, you can they will provide the training for different time zones. You can see.
Steger, one second. So I can only see your PPT. I can't really see your browser search.
Okay, then I will share the URL in the chat. Actually, by attending this session, it will be for 5 to 6 hours usually. That is focusing on the certification preparation, which section will contain this many questions from this area and all. That will definitely help you to pass the certification, as well as there is a bonus, that is $100 $100 for this $200 exam. That is one I want to show you. And you may register for the certification in the website Web Assessor. I will share that URL also in the chat link. And today is the last day. The agenda for today is flows, visual flows, controllers, Lightning component framework, and Lightning web component framework. And let me welcome Praveen to continue the first session of the day. I will stop the share.
Okay, so let me share my screen.
Yes, Praveen, you can see the screen.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, everyone. No, it's really it's good that especially on Sundays you take your time off to attend our sessions. So it's really great. And I'm Praveen. I'm development lead at SoftSquare. So today we're going to see about Lightning Flow. This is a forward-looking statement. So if you're a customer who's trying to evaluate Salesforce, always make your purchasing decision based on the features that are currently available. And that's it. Flow builders. So in Salesforce, when you have a business requirement that needs to be implemented, there are more than one ways you can solve, you can implement your business. process in Salesforce. And flows are one such ways. And when we talk about flow, so what is flow? Flow is a series of, it contains series of elements that can be connected together to form an action or a series of action. And in order to create a flow, you need the help of a flow builder. So we'll see what flow builder is about. Flow Builder is a visual designer interface where you can create a flow. It contains a series of elements that you can drag and drop onto the UI, and you can build your process out of it. And there are a lot of ways you can you can create your flows, and you can also create custom screen through Flow Builder. So say for example, as a sales rep, if I'm interacting with the customer, and I have to create like 3 records during my client interaction or customer interaction. And if the business user or the sales rep is using the standard Salesforce navigation to create the records, it would require a ton of clicks. So that really, takes a lot of time away for the call. And in order to like solve that, what as a Salesforce administrator or Salesforce developer, what you can do is you can build guided screens through Flow Builder, which would aid the work of your business user or sales rep. In the same way, you can also create behind the scene automation, like whenever a record gets created, you can send an email to your customer. So things like that can be achieved through workflow rules. And even you can connect to external systems and through Apex code. And in general, there are like two types of flows that are available. And the first one is the auto launch flow. And the second one is the screen flow. Auto launch flows can be triggered through a record create or update event. And say, for example, one common case is sending an email whenever you create a service request complaining about a product is not working. Right? So whenever you create phone your customer or support agent, they would like get all the details, and they what they would do is they would create a record in their system. As a result, what happens is a email will be sent or an SMS will be sent to your phone, so that you can get the tracking number of the complaint, and in your subsequent interaction you can use the tracking number to get the status of what really happened and what is the status of the complaint. So things like that can be achieved through auto launch flow. And if you need to invoke a series of actions periodically, say for example, month, weekly, or daily, you can leverage Lightning scheduler flows. So imagine, like 3 years back when I start, for like 5 years back when I started Salesforce development, there weren't an option where you can schedule a set of actions within a time period. You need to write code here, but over here through flows, through few button clicks, you can call a series of action within a time period or in a time period. And also you can leverage no flow trigger, which is sort of a mechanism where you can call a repetitive flow through another flow. Say for example, you have already built a flow that is potentially can be used across multiple flows, and you don't want to repeat the same logic in all the places. So using no flow trigger approach, what you can do is you can create a flow, and from your other flows you can attach the repetitive flow through an element called subflow. Through that, what you can do is you can repeatedly call a logic that can be invoked from multiple places. Screen flows. Screen flows it requires a visual cue. So it needs a user interaction where user clicking on a button, or user can interact with the UI, and based on the operations or based on the input they do on the UI, a subsequent actions are triggered. Say for example, I've told you like a scenario where a user has to create 3 records when he is interacting with this customer. And screen flow is one of the best ways you can use solve all the clicks and the navigation problems when you're interacting with your customer. And even through screen flows, based on the input they give on the UI, you can like redirect the flow to a different path. Say, for example, if I'm getting information about a partner, then I can, based on the drop down that you select. So let us say I'm creating a record and it contains two values. One is partner, the other one is customer. And if they select partner, then using ScreenFlow and few flow elements, what I can do is I can redirect them to a different path that would only specify the partner specific UI fields. And if they select customer, what I can do is, based on their selection, I can redirect the flow logic to a different path where the user is presented with only customer related fields. So we have that sort of a leverage using screen flows. And since it is a screen flow and it needs a visual cue, you can use screen flow in lightning pages, community pages, quick action, as well as even it can be invoked through lightning component as well as visual post pages. And this is how you can distribute your flow. So when you open up a record detail page or a home page in lightning experience and you click on the edit page, on your left hand side you will see the standard elements that is exposed by Salesforce. So out of this, one is there's something called flow, which you need to drag and drop onto your UI and select the appropriate flow that you need to launch. In addition to that, it also can be, I told you, right, flow can be also launched from a quick action. So when you expose it as a quick action, it shows up as a button in your record detail page, and clicking on it, it would launch your flow. And similarly, all the actions that you expose on your quick action can also be made available on your mobile experience. So on your mobile experience, this is how it shows if you expose a flow icon that is attached to a quick action. Lightning flow builder. So I told you, right, a flow contains a series of elements, right? So if you look at over here, these are the series of elements that are available in the flow builder, which can be used to develop your process. So we have like interaction element, logic element, and data element. Let us talk about the data element first. So data element, it all talks about creating a record, updating a collection of records, or querying the records, even like deleting the records. You can really delete a record through flow. And we have like interaction element, the name itself gives away, right? So you need a visual cue there. So in order to build your screen flow, you need to drag and drop your screen flow onto the UI. And when you click on it, you can see a list of options that are available there, where you can drop a checkbox, a pick list, or datetime field onto the UI and start building your own screen. And actions are quick actions that is supported by your objects. So when you drag and drop your actions onto the UI, you have to select what object the action belongs to and what type of action needs to be invoked. And we talked about subflow, right? So if you have repeated logic that's there in a flow, you can develop a separate flow and call the repeated logic using subflow element. And we have something under logic, we have three elements: assignment, decision, and loop. Assignment is normally used where you have a screen and user are entering your details, and at the end of the day, when they are done editing, entering the fields, you want to create them as record. So through assignment um, node, what you can do is you can assign all the values that you have collected from your UI to your variable instance or the object instance, which in turn can be leveraged by create or update record to do the DML operations. And in addition to that, we have a decision node, where which would help you to decide which flow path the flow should take. So say for example, if I've told you an example where a custom when you're as a business user, when I'm entering the record, I've selected the pick list as partner, then I have to show only partner specific screens. So if I select partners, what I'll do is I'll use the decision node to check if the value is partner. If it is partner, then I'll go to the partner UI. And if the type is customer, then what I'll do is I'll redirect to the customer screen, where it shows a whole different fields. And we have another element called loop. Loop is generally used, it's like a for loop, right? So generally we use for loop because you need to do a manipulation of field, or you're finding a record. I mean, over here in flow, what you can you do is, you can pass a collection to your loop, and you can, inside the loop element, you can configure the variables appropriately, so that it would filter the appropriate result and return back the one that we are looking for, upon which that needs to be operated. So without any delay, let us jump into the demo. So we saw, like, there are like two flows are out there. One is an auto launched flow, the other one is a screen flow, right? So I've built a simple example with using the auto launched flow. So I'll tell you the example that I've built. Okay, so I've logged into Salesforce, and I'm going to the tourister app. I'm clicking on contact, and I have Chester Spring PA. I'm selecting this account. And if you see here, I have totally 11 contacts under Chester Spring. And the use case that I've built for the auto launch flow is, every time a contact gets created under an account, it should calculate how many contacts are there, and it should populate the value over here. So if there are, like, 5 contacts under an account, then the number of contacts should be 5. So since, if you have seen here, we have 11, the value of this field, number of contacts, is 11. Now if I go ahead and create a new contact, I'll give my name, I'll give customer. And as soon as when I click on save, the auto launch flow behind the scene gets triggered. And what happens is, the number of contacts is increased. So it matches the number of contacts that are there under the account. So I'll show you how the auto launch flow works. On your setup, so the way you need to navigate to your flow is, click on the gear icon, click on the setup, search for flow. Under process automation, you will see an item called flow. Click on it, and this is the flow that I've created. So this is an auto launch flow. This is the visual designer that I'm talking about. So this is the flow builder, and you see in this, you saw in the screenshot, right? There were, like, a lot of elements out there. So these are the elements that are out there. So what I did is, after you create an account contact, so I have a process builder here. A flow cannot be directly invoked. Auto launch flow cannot be directly invoked without a process. So that we need some intermediate help to do that. So what I did is, through process builder. Process builder is also an automation tool in Salesforce, that whose feature overlaps with the features of flow, but there are few exciting, or, like, different exciting features that are there in flow which are not there in other automation tools like process builder or workflow rules. So count contact in account. This is the process builder that I've created. So it operates on a contact, and the process type is record change. So every time the contact changes, this process gets invoked. And let us see how I have configured it. So the object type is a contact, and whenever the record is created. Okay, great. So I'm not evaluating any conditions. So as soon as the record gets created, the flow gets inside this node, checks if it is contact, okay, good, and checks if I don't have here condition, just I'm executing my action. And the action that I've configured here is invoking a flow. So we have the contact counter, right? So if you see here, contact counter, so this is the flow that I'm calling from my process builder, and I'm passing the value of the account ID from the contact and to the contact ID. So over here, the flow accepts a variable called account ID. This is there. So as soon as the record gets created, the process the process builder runs. Can I move this somewhere else? Okay. The process builder runs and it invokes the contact counter, and it would pass the contact account ID to the account ID variable in the flow. And as a result, the okay, so as a result, the contact counter flow gets executed, and I need to query the existing records of the account, right? So I have a get record element. So all you have to do is drag this and give it a name, test, and you need to select. In my case, I would select, I'm querying contacts. So no the only condition that I need is I need to query the contacts by the account ID. So I would select the account ID by the account ID that is set by the flow, the process builder, which is this. So this is the actual condition that I use. Okay, and that's what I've done here. So the object is contact, all the conditions are met, and I need to match only the context that is associated with the account that is passed by the process builder. And how many records to store? I'm selecting all the records, and I need all the fields, so I'm selecting this option. So done. And as soon as the record gets queried, and what I have to do is I have to iterate over the records and try to count the number of contacts, correct? So as for that, I'm using a loop element. So you need to name the loop element and its API name. And over here, you need to pass the collection. You need for loop, you need an iterator collection, right? For similarly, over here, the get records will act as the collection input to the loop, and I'm passing this. So if you want to select, so all to select this, um, clear the value over here, and you will see contacts from get contacts. You need to select this, right? And specify the direction. If you want to sort it from the first element to the last, or last element to the first, you can definitely do that. And usually for a for loop, you need a temporary variable, right? And each element that will be stored in a temporary variable, and whose value you can access in subsequent actions. So we have already created a temporary variable called contact idx. So every time, so if there are 5 contacts are out there, the contact 1 will be assigned whenever I is equal to 1. If the I is equal to 2, then contact 2 gets assigned. And every time the iteration takes place, it goes here. Okay, every time, if you see the arrow here, every time the iteration takes place, it goes to the assignment node. And what I'm doing is, we have created a variable called contact account. So in order to create a variable, there is a tab called manager. And over here, what you can do is, in order to temporarily store all your state of the flow, you can leverage the new resource button and create the appropriate variable and store them and use them in your process. So in my case, I need a counter variable that stores the number of contacts under an account, right? So what I did is, on the manager tab, I clicked on new resource and I clicked on variable. I gave it a name, number of contacts. I'm selecting a type. This is a number, so, and this is a decimal places, and the default value is 0, because counter should start with 0, and as we iterate over each contact, it will increase the number of contacts by 1, right? So this is how I did. And over here, if you can see, I created a field called contact count. So this is something that I'm using over here. So the variable of the contact count is equal to, and I need an incremental variable. So it is always, every time a contact is encountered, 0 plus 1 the first time, and the second time the contact is encountered, it is 1 plus 1. So I need some sort of a formula over here. So what I did is I created a new variable called formula. So this is count contact formula, and I selected the formula type count formula. It is a number, and what I would do is, I have to store the intermediate variable, which is contact count, whose initial value is 0 plus 1. So the first time the contact comes inside the assignment node, it is 0 plus 1, which gets assigned back to the contact count. So at the end of the first iteration, the contact count would be 1. And the second time we encounter another contact, what happens is, the formula for the contact counter incrementer variable is contact count plus 1. So at the end of the first iteration, it is 1. Now at the end of the second iteration, it would be 1 plus 1, 2. The same way, I'm gradually incrementing the value of contact count. Okay. And as soon as the last element is done, what I'm doing is I'm assigning to the account instance. So I told you, right, whenever you get an input from your user, you need to assign it to your instance in order to use it in your update operation. So what I did is, so in order to, like, pass a collection, I mean, update records expects as a collection, I have to create a variable of type account. So in the same way, what I did is I clicked on variable, I gave it account records, I selected the record type, and I'm I'm selecting account. Okay, and this is how you create a variable. That's what I did over here. So if you see, I have a variable called account record, and it is of type record, and the object type of the record is account. So I need an instance, and in order to, like, update a record, I need the ID, and along with that, I have to assign the number of contacts field to the account, right? So what I'm doing is I'm using the assignment node. I gave it a name, I gave the API name, and the ID of the account. So all, like, the way you do it is, since you are populating the field of the account record, you need to add the flower braces, exclamation, search for account. Okay, and then ID. You need an ID for an update call. You select the ID, and what should be the value of the ID, the account dot ID. It should be the value that the flow got in the very beginning, right? So we stored the account ID information at the very beginning of the flow. So we have to assign the value of the account ID to the account.id field. And similarly, we are updating the records, and what we are the ID, and as well as what we are doing is we are also updating the number of contacts that are there. So I told you, right, we have this variable which intermediately stores the number of contact records that are there in the account. So after the iteration got over, it contains the updated value. So, and what we need to do is we need to assign the number of contacts to the contact number. So that's what I'm doing here. So similarly, when like you picked the account ID, you can click on the contact ID and you have to select what field you are going to use. So I'm using number of contacts equal to what value you're going to assign. I'm going to assign the value of the contact count, and done. And finally, as soon as this is done, the instance is passed to the update node. An update node, all you need is give the name and the API name, and use the ID and all the fields from the. So you at the end of the day, you're passing the ID. You're already set the ID on the account instance, right? So that's what this option is about. And you need at the end of the day, you need a collection to to update the record. So since we have used account record to populate the fields, we are using the same account record. So if you need to select one, the drop down over here would list you all the fields that are created. So you need to properly pick the appropriate one. So this is the field that we set in the assignments, and I'm selecting the account record and clicking on that. And once all your changes are done, all you need to do is save as, and that's it. Run your flow. And this is how usually what you can do. This is something that few years back we used to write code. We used to write at least like 15 or 20 lines of code to do this. But now through auto launch flow, you can like do achieve requirements like this through visual interface and through button clicks. That's it, very simple. Without writing a single piece of code, you are able to achieve what your business requirement, which is really great. And yeah, this is about the auto launch flows, and I have an example for ScreenFlow. So ScreenFlow requires some sort of an UI where the user can interact with it, and based on the input that is that the which the user enters, you can use that input to create a record. So over here what I've done is I've simplified. I have like two objects in my org: vehicle and trip. So, and as a trip manager or tour manager, I have a few vehicle details as well as trip details with me, and I want to create them together. I mean, I don't want to like normally what you would do is you will go here, click new, and enter some value P1234, select the type, 410. Okay, vehicle got created. Now I need to assign the trip. So I have to go here, new. It gets populated. I'm selecting the customer. I'll give the C details. I'll select the type, and address is test one. I'll pick the time. I'll pick the status. Okay, I mean, this is how normally it works. Imagine you have like we can even solve this through ScreenFlow and see how I've done it. On the home page, I have a screen where I'm getting minimal information that is required to create a vehicle. So as a tour manager, I'm creating car, Ford. I'll give the model X411. I'm giving the number of seats. Next. That's it. the vehicle would be created, and here's a trip screen. So I'm selecting customer. It's a two-way trip. I need two seats, and I'm entering the address details. Next, that's it. I don't need to like navigate to a new UI and click on a new again, enter all the details again. If I need to like again create a new vehicle, again I have to go back to vehicles again, click on new. So you can, as administrator, as a developer, you can simplify all these things through, ScreenFlow. So the vehicle and trips are created. Now if I would like to like launch it again, all I have to do is click on the checkbox and click on next. The same UI launches again, and you can repeat the same process again and again. And we'll see how this has been done. Okay, so we saw about auto launched flows. Now let us go and see the tour manager flow, which is a screen flow. So I told you ScreenFlow requires a user interface. So I've dragged the ScreenFlow element over here. And if you open up the ScreenFlow element, it contains a blank screen normally. And all you need to do is, drop in the fields that you want to be shown on the UI. Say, for example, let us look at the records that got created. Okay, let us make a little modification, small modification over here. If you see over here, the record that I created, uh, did I did not set the name field of the vehicle. So as a result, Salesforce automatically assigns the ID of the record. So I don't like this behavior. I need to change that. So let us see how, without even writing a code, see how simple it is. Okay, I'm creating this. I'm opening up the vehicle creation UI, and the name field, right? So we have a name field over here. I have to drag it over here. It's just a text box. This registration number. Okay, this is the API name. That's where the value of the registration number gets stored, and it is a required field. And clicking on done. Okay, and now what I have to do is, I've got the details from the screen. Then I have to populate the instance of the vehicle. Now, on the assignment node, I'm going to set the name field of the vehicle. Click on vehicle, search for name equal to the registration number. Done. I've saved my flow. I'm activating it. Now let me go back to the screen. Let me refresh it once. And you see, without writing a single line of code, I'm able to change my UI through drag and drop interface. Over here, I can give the registration number details, R, X, Y, YW123, number of seat is 2. I'm selecting myself as the customer. It's a one-way trip. Seat required is 2. Test, address. I'm picking the date and time and click on next. That's it. The record got created. See how simple it is, right? And how powerful flows are. Now let us see. Let us see what I have built here. So like I said, I got the input. I configured it through drag and drop interface, all the custom screen, and all the input that has been entered over here can be assigned to the vehicle. And after that, I'm creating the records. And again, And what I'm trying to do here is a trip contains an lookup to vehicle. So I have to assign the created vehicle ID to the trip. So again, with the help of assignment node, I'm like, assigning the vehicle dot ID, which is the created vehicle ID, to the trip dot vehicle. So if you see on the record that got created, it will have an assigned trip vehicle. So this piece of code that we have done here takes care of it. And similarly, we have uh, a screen for to get the trip details, and we need to convert the details that we got from the trip info to an instance, and create the record. And once that is done, we are like asking for the user if they would like to continue the trip and vehicle creation screen. And if they click on the checkboxes whose value is continue checkbox, if you see how I have leveraged the checkbox over here. So I've had the decision node. I'm checking for if the continue checkbox value is equal to true. If it is true, then I'm going back to the actual the starting screen. If it is false, I mean, if I'm not like checking that box again, let us see what happens. Click on next, selecting myself to test. I'm not selecting this checkbox. If I click on next, that's it. The flow exits. So this is how powerful you can. This is how powerful. Um, these are the features that are available in like Flow, which can be leveraged to build your business process or automation. So as admin or as administrator. Now let's go back to the presentations. Now we saw the capabilities of Flow, and we'll see the advantages of what Flow offers. So we have an option called before save, which gets invoked even before the workflow rules or process builder gets invoked. We have a huge order of execution step that Salesforce has behind the scene. And workflow rules and process builder, they happen later on, like whenever the record gets committed in the database, only then process builder and workflow rules get fired. But even before that, you using flow, what you can do is you can like through before save, you can set the values of your field based on another value. So that is really possible through flow, which really improves the number of times the record gets updated. And even through like what we have done here is completely through no code. We have not written a single line of code here. In some screens, like I told you earlier, there are possibly there are requirements where you need to show the details from a third party API on your flow. So when such requirement comes up, you can what you can do is through Apex, you can create a small Apex class through which you can query all the API details, and present that in flow. So only that piece of information requires Apex, and the rest of the flow can be developed through custom screen. And also flow can be used with lightning app, lightning component, as well as visual force pages. Even you can like call Apex from flow. So, and also you can create flow as a template and distribute them, so that you don't have to start it from the scratch. They can use the template and start building their like changing their flow based on the individual requirement. And you can even distribute your flows through subflows. I told you, right, if you have some sort of an action that is done and in flow, you can invoke them through subflows, and through other flow through subflow. So that can be done through flows. And also you can leverage the flows that are available in the App Exchange. The App Exchange are nothing but a marketplace for Salesforce apps. So if you don't have a solution right now, The first thing you have to do is, if it's really complex, you have to go and explore app exchange and see if someone has solved it. If someone has solved it, when it's better to use them. Okay, it is all involved, it's based on the business. If they would like to use it, then they can, or if you want to build it, you can definitely do it, but requires a ton of work and maintenance. Again, I told you, Flow is one of the automations tool that is available in Salesforce. So you need to properly evaluate what would work for your use case. So we have tools like Process Builder, Workflow Rules, and Approval Process, which can, whose feature pretty much overlaps with the feature we have with the Flow. So things like, say for example, if it is if the use case, or if your requirement that you're working on is complex, or if it is really simple, you can solve it with Process Builder or Workflow Rules, or even like Approval Process. And if you're looking for a visual designer interface where you can configure things, then you can use, definitely you can use Process Builder and Flow Builder. And you can, like, one of the features that aren't there with the that aren't there in the other automation tools is the ability to delete the records. So Flow Builder can delete the records, and also it can call Apex. Same way, Process Builder also can call an Apex. And it also supports time-based action. It also supports, and if you see here, Process Builder does not support user interaction. It does not have a visual cue. All the actions happen behind the scene. But as far as Flow Builder is concerned, you have you can, like, build your own screen to drive your process. And you can also call your Apex class, and these are the features that are there in other automations tool, which you have to, like, always evaluate before choosing the tool that would solve your business problem. Okay. Thank you, and this is pretty much it about the Flow. And thank you everyone listening to my presentation. And the next presentation will be uh, taken care by Ashwant. And over to you, Ashwant.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. That's a nice
Uh,
presentation.
Thank you, Praveen. Yashwant, before you start, I will run two poll questions. That questions will be helpful for the panel discussion.
Sure,
Uh,
sure, Sridhar. Go
yeah,
ahead.
please answer.
Guys, you're seeing few questions on your screen and go through the questions and provide appropriate answers.
Only 29 people answered.
Come on, guys, keep voting, keep voting.
Okay. So 76 percentage are developers. Let me end this poll and um, launch the next one. Please answer quickly.
If you are a developer, development lead, or solution architect, which of these technology do you deal with? So you can select multiple choices if you're already worked in some of the platform already.
Okay, let me stop the poll. Majority are from Java. Okay, you can share the screen and start your presentation, Ashwin.
Thank you. Praveen, I think you will be able to see my screen, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shikhar. Yeah. Hi guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on your respective time zone, please. And about myself, this is Ashwant, and working in the software for past 4 years. And today we are going to discuss about customization of user interface. So before we start, I'd like to give you the forward-looking statement. You might have seen this all from the past or entire developer training. So make your purchase decision once it's generally available. And I'd like to thank Salesforce Ohana for giving us the opportunity to learn and giving the back what we learn. And without delay, I'd just like to start on custom UI. What is custom user interface? So far we talked about, or we discussed about, we see how we can develop triggers, how to develop flows, process builders. So whatever we have seen so far are is running behind the process except the flow. So you have a complexity of application, and you cannot you're not going to achieve that particular solution with flow. So how to customize a user interface in Salesforce? What are the ways we have a user interface customization ways in Salesforce? So before, a user interface is like, generally you guys know, it's a whatever end user is seeing is the user interface, right? So whatever you built on behind the scene, no matter how you build, no one is going to see that. So whatever you're presenting or whatever you're rendering in the UI, so you should be more uh, creative, and you should think out of the boxes on particular solutions too. So without delay, let's jump on what are the possible ways we have in the Salesforce. So if you see, we can customize the user interface in Salesforce using VF pages and Visual Force component, Lightning component, Lightning Web component. So first, let's see only the Visual Force page in this session right now. And what is Visual Force page? So Visual Force is nothing but is a markup language which allows customizing of UI on top of the Salesforce platform. So it consists of two elements in the controller and the markup. Whatever you are seeing a right side of my screen is whatever you're rendering is the markup, what we used to call. And the controller where you're having here and which runs all your server side actions is we used to call the controller. And in the Visual Force, we're having a standard 150 plus standard components which you don't need to create each and every code, where we can simply select with the respective components itself. And you can even build custom components, and it can support all the standard web technologies like Angular and JavaScript. You can even write your JavaScript in the Visual Force page. So let's see how MVC pattern works in Visual Force page. Like I think you might have already heard about this model view controller. So what if you split this with a Visual Force page? What is view? Whatever you are rendering in the UI, whatever your end user is viewing is the view, and excuse me, whatever you're accessing the data is the model. Like in our Salesforce, it will be like either as object or as Apex class. And in the controller which handles the UI as well as which controls the entire server side actions is the controller. So let's decode a standard component. Okay, so I was saying, like, we're having 150 standard components where you don't need to write each and every code. Let's see, this is one standard component we have in the Salesforce. It's just is input text field and it's accepting a value. So let's decode this in the standard HTML. Apex is a prefix where we can have where you do see in the some of the components where you built, it's a prefix of your respective component. And input text is the component name where it resides, and this is the component we are invoking. And value is the attribute. And merge field, there is something called merge field in the Visual Force page. You can directly use the variables in the Visual Force page directly from the Apex controller. So let's not forget about let's not worry about the what is OTP here. We'll see while we are seeing the demo. And if you this is what we written in the markup level in the Visual Force page. So what Salesforce is doing behind the scene, so it will convert a standard HTML tag with this respect to whatever you are using in the tag. So this is nothing but which is running in the browser level. So browser should understand. So Salesforce is converting with respect to the browser understandability. So let's see quickly how to create a Visual Force page. So I'm already logged into the one of my Salesforce org. So in the quick find, you can enter Visual Force page here, or I'll even go with the developer console, which is pretty much easier for the developer and end user. So I'll create a one Visual Force page quickly here. So in this here we have a file, and I think if you forgot or if you're not sure how to go to the developer console, in the setup, if you see a gear icon here, just click on this and you will see a developer console option. Let's click. If you click on this, it will navigate to a developer console tab, and here we are. And let's click on file, and you have a new option. And you already seen Apex class trigger, and now currently we are in a Visual Force page. Let's click on this, and I'd like to give the name where we used to start with our programming, and I don't want to get hurt our programmer ancestors if they are listening. So I will use the same hello world. So which is a common class or common page which we used to start with. So this is simple. So Salesforce, whatever you're rendering or whatever you're writing markup, this should reside between this Apex page tag. So simply when you convert this to HTML, this is HTML tag for our HTML pages. So let's have a simple code here. Welcome to the dev training. Thanks for joining us. So I just added few just English language here, which is nothing, no code is involved. If you see here, there is preview button in a preview button, and if you click on this, this will render. This is the output of our whatever we have written here. So let me quickly go to this. Yeah, here we go. So this is what I written. Okay, so now make some let's add some customization or some beautification to this particular. Okay, I'm just adding a div which you're already familiar with this. And so here I'm just writing one style, which is I just want to align this to center. That's it. Here we go. So so this is pretty much easier, and we don't need to bother about, or if you are even in admin or you're trying to coming to the development. So Visual Force page is easier play where you can play with the customization code. So now so far we've seen like what is Visual Force page, how can we deal with this. So if I want to get data from the server, or if you want to bring if you want to render a particular data here, so how can we bring the data to the UI, and how can we deal with it, how can we store the data into the Salesforce. Let's see that. So I'm back to my presentation. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we're having few controllers where you want to, as I discussed in the MVC, we have few controllers which are controlling our entire UI. So which is nothing but is your backend controller where it controls your entire server actions, like retrieving from the data or storing into the database. Okay. So what is standard controller? Standard controller is a class which action needs to be taken based on user interaction with view. Standard controller, which is provided by the Salesforce itself, and you can simply add a custom object. If you see in the right hand side, you can simply pass the object name, and it will support basic operations of like CRUD operations, save, delete, and edit operations. So let's see a quick demo. I already created one Visual Force page for our time save, and I'm opening here. So here I have a Visual Force page with standard controller. So if you see here, I just added one attribute called standard controller, which is predefined, and I'm passing account. So which is you already known. We have some standard object called account, and record set where is nothing but I'm bringing all the accounts. So that is a temporary variable where we can store all the accounts in your org. So apex page block is a tag which I already discussed, or which is one of the 150 plus standard components, which is nothing but which will give you the uh, one particular UI to render a page block. Will show you that. Page block table is nothing but is a data table, and it's rendering in a table format. If you see here, I just iterating through apex page block table is kind of like a for loop. If you talk about, I'm just iterating through the all accounts and I'm rendering the name. So let's see how it will look like. I'm clicking on preview here. So see, we have a one account and I'm querying this account here. So here you didn't even write a single piece of code in the Apex controller to query all the records. So standard controller will take care of all the actions like querying the records and even the data DML operations. So this is about standard controller, and let's see what is custom controller. So far we talked about like how we are bringing the records from the Salesforce with standard controller. So where you didn't even write a single piece of code for the customization of the Apex. So here, if you want to bring like you want to add some of the customization logic. Let's say you want to add two numbers and you want to render in the UI. So in that particular place, how we can't achieve with the standard controller, right? So you are building your custom own logic. So for that, we have a custom controller, and which will accept the same Apex controller. And here you need to write all your code with respect to the actions, whatever you're going to run. So let's see how custom controller, how Visual Force page will look like with the custom controller. So I already created one Visual Force page for this, and which is account list with custom. So here, if you see, my controller is the same. Previously for standard controller, we are using standard controller attribute here. And for the custom controller, you just need to use controller. And this is a Apex class, which I already created. Okay. And let's open this and let's see what we are dealing here. And this is my controller. And it has nothing here, just I have a one getter setter variable, and which is a getter setter variable. Some might have already heard about this. Getter setter variable is nothing but a variable. If you want to render a data, or if you want to, whatever you are doing a circle, let's say here I'm doing a circle simply, and you want to present this return data in the UI. So for that, you need to use a variable with getter setter declaration. So what it will do is, so that the Visual Force page markup will get to know there is something variable which has data. So I declared as a getter setter variable, and this is a constructor which we already seen about in the earlier sessions, and I'm querying the accounts, list of accounts, and assigning to this getter setter variable. So here in the Visual Force page, what I'm doing here is I'm just iterating through, as I said earlier, I'm just iterating. Page block table is a iterator in a Salesforce, and which will present the data in the tabular format. So I'm iterating through all my accounts and rendering using Apex column tag and assigning the respective name here. So if you want to use like if you want to do a manipulation over here, so after I return account, I want to do some I want to bring all the contacts or some other use case. Okay, you can even deal with using getter methods or setter methods. Some might have already familiar with this. So which is all nothing but, so instead of here using getter setter, you will have a getter methods where you will do all your respective actions inside this. So this is a simple syntax how to write a getter setter methods in the Apex class. And here that's it, I'm just rendering the same. So if you click on preview, this will also do the same. I'm just bringing all the accounts here and rendering in the UI. So standard controller, custom controller is looks like same, but custom controller you have to perform all your actions in behind the scene. Standard controller, Salesforce will take care of whatever you are passing based on the standard controller name. So now you want to use standard controller at the same time, and you want to add you don't need to write all the code like as I said earlier, you don't need to write a code for save, or you don't need to write a code for delete. So you just need to concatenate two numbers and render in the UI. So for that, for the save and delete operations, you are trying to leverage the standard controller. And how would I leverage the same? Uh, I want to customize my one particular functionality. How we can leverage that? So for that, we have something called controller extension. If you see in the right hand side, we have a standard controller and extension. So you cannot add standard controller as well as custom controller at a time. If you want to add if you want to add extra controller, you have to specify using extensions, so that you can specify a number of classes here with comma separated. So that's why it is extensions. And here extension is a class where it's just also same as Apex class, where it involves all the customization of your logic. So let's see how Visual Force page with control extension looks like. So I'm going to my developer console. I'm sorry, file open and pages. So I have a VF page which already I created, which is account extension. So if you see here, I'm just having standard controller using account, and I'm using extension, my control extension. So what we are doing here, let's dig it here. So I'm using controller and I'm opening this. So if you see, I'm just this is the one of the parameterized constructor which we already seen previously. So whenever you are defining standard controller and whenever you are using extension, you should define this parameterized constructor, and you can access the whatever record you are currently viewing here. So what I'm doing here is, previously, as I said, we can have a getter method. I have a one variable called welcome message, which is nothing but I didn't use getter setter. I use getter method. So if you see, if you want to declare a getter method for a variable, you just need to concatenate get and the respective variable name. So here what I'm doing is just I'm concatenating the account name. So let's preview this. And here is a form, Apex form, which is nothing but standard HTML form, which will contains all the input fields. Here I'm having Apex input field, which accepts input from the user, and command button, which is something called which is a user interaction like HTML standard button. And here I'm having standard save action. So if you see in my controller, I didn't have any of the method with a save. So which is nothing but it's a standard save method. Let's preview this. So here you see you're having as a value as null, because you don't have any account record here. So I'll just walk you through how we can do this. So I'm entering a one test record here. I'm creating one account record here. Demo account 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm just click on save, which created a Salesforce standard account and which has a ID here. So if I want to if I want to preview the same account in the same page what I built here, and I want to auto populate the name if the record ID already exists. So let's preview the same again. And here there is something after the question mark. Let's get rid of all these and let's add ID equal to the created record ID. And here we go. It's auto populating the value from here. So how it's behaving is using the standard controller. Here I have a parameterized constructor which will queries the record behind the scene, and I'm assigning the same record to this particular local variable. And Salesforce will take care of this rendering of the name fields and auto population of the values. So here I'm just concatenating the message with this local variable. So it's pretty much simple, and here this way you can define all your you can create all your Visual Force pages with customization. So let's see how can we what are the ways we can interact with the server. So as I showed you previously, there is standard button called Apex command button. So through this you can even interact with the server. Or there is something called action function. So it will also act like the same as command button actions. So you just need to pass the respective action name and method names. And there is something interestingly called remote action, which is invoked from the JavaScript itself. So if you want to whatever you're dealing in the markup level using either action function or command button, which will only takes place from the markup level, which is directly linked with the tightly coupled with the server. So if I want to invoke from the JavaScript, so as long as you know JavaScript is a very much faster. So if I want to invoke with the server from the JavaScript, so here we have a some just example I'm showing here. So with this syntax, you can invoke even JavaScript remote action method from the JavaScript itself. So so far, so let's to deal with this, I just want to take you guys back to the like 5 or 10 years back. So having, yeah, so this is what we have previously, like before lightning came into the picture. So far we are currently we demoed all in the lightning. So before lightning, this is what we have in the Salesforce, which is we used to call as classic view. And this is how it's the visual, if you want to add a visual force page, this will render over here. So this is a legacy model, or which is old version of the UI. So if I want to build, so after that lightning is came into the picture, and it become a very rich interface, and it's having very powerful UI, and all our customers are attracted to the lightning UI. So how would we deal with the and some of the customers are already in the visual force page, which they are not even converted to lightning component or lightning migration. It's not a straightforward, you cannot convert or you cannot migrate visual force page to lightning. So you want to support your customers, and you want to like, you want to give the same rich user interface from the visual force page itself. So that we have a something called SLDS, which is nothing but Salesforce Lightning Design System, and which has a powerful UI where you don't need to write any piece of the code to have that particular CSS. And what SLDS contains, it has a CSS framework, it has HTML components, and it can even have icons and design tokens. Let's see how a visual force page with SLDS looks like. So here we go. This is a just demo VF page which I took from even from the trailhead itself. So if you see this UI, and if you compare with sorry, yeah, if you compare with this UI and this UI, whatever you are seeing in the lightning experience, it's look like the same, because Salesforce is using the same styles and all the stuff here. So if you see the headers and the table and the footer, so all this stuff which you can even replicate from the lightning itself. So how can I add the SLDS to the my visual force page? Here we go. So there is something called Apex SLDS component, which I already discussed, it's one of the 150 plus components. So you just simply add this Apex SLDS tag to the visual force page, which will adds the all the styles from the lightning itself. And before we have before we conclude, each and every module or whatever we're discussing here, which will definitely have a consideration. So one of the I'm listing out few considerations here, which is you cannot do a DML in the controller itself. So you might have already known like what is DML, and you cannot insert or update, or you cannot make any DML operations in the controller, and you cannot use any DML operations in the getter or setter methods, in the getter methods. And the last one, whatever the governor limits which we have seen so far previously in our earlier sessions, so the same governor limits will apply to the same Apex classes, whatever you're invoking from the visual force page. And last but not least, a view state, which is nothing but whatever we having in the Apex class, like a heap size of 6 MB, the same we having in the visual force page 2, that is called, we usually used to call view state, which is 135 KB. Whatever you are holding in the UI level, whatever you are declaring the variables, which all the variables whatever you define with a getter setter, which will not go more than 135 KB. So this is, you must remember this while you're whenever you're building visual force page, so that if at all it exceeds 135 KB, it will, you will get the view state error. And with this, thank you for listening from past 30 minutes, guys, and over to you, Shekhar.
Uh, Thank you for the wonderful session, Yashwant, as always. We will have 5 minutes break. Then after the break, we will have the panel discussion.
Uh-huh.
Vilu?
Hi, Andy.
Okay, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I'll
You're
just do a couple of minutes presentation myself, and then I'll introduce you and we'll talk.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is the weather in Chicago?
Yesterday was a little chilly. Today it is a lot better. So we can go for a walk. So
Okay.
that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah, we did
And
go
I
for a
guess
walk
it's,
yesterday, but
yeah, the summer should be pleasant, except that you have to be careful when you walk, right? You have to be distanced.
yeah,
much
true. I mean, I was walking yesterday, but only I saw one and myself, and other people were kind of taking it easy. So it's a little bit scary to walk, but not too many people.
Andy, you can
Yeah, I'm getting
start
some
now.
echo. I don't know why. Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be having our fourth class today. We are hoping that you've learned from our session, and as much as we have tried to give back to you, we would appreciate you giving back to the community with your learnings, your experiences later on. I just want to give you a few career tips before we bring our panel discussion, the panelists into the call. We're going to have a one-to-one fireside discussion, probably about 15 minutes. But before that, I'll spend a couple of minutes introducing you to some aspects of Salesforce or Salesforce statistics that would be useful for you for your careers in the long term as well as in the short term. As you can see from my slide, majority of you are developers here. I think about 78%. And then, of course, there are a few business analysts also. And you're trying to differentiate yourself in the Salesforce ecosystem you're differentiating yourself in your careers by learning Salesforce and getting into a career around the Salesforce ecosystem. So in order to do that, as you can see in this slide, you would notice that due to COVID, that all of us have been impacted. This IT industry numbers. The entire IT industry has been impacted about 8 to 9% in 2020 alone. Year over year growth since the last year. So 2018-19 versus 2019-20 has been an 8% downturn. And you can see from, this is an industry list, as you can see, the leftmost is the most impacted. The minus 35-40% are the entertainment, air transport, as well as restaurants and hotels, right? Those three segments are really, really impacted. In order to position yourself in the job market or a long-term career, I think the space that I would suggest you delve in is towards the right side, which is all the light blue or greenish blue that you see health insurance. Of course, telecommunications, as you've known, Zoom has 200 million users a day. Of course, there are not too many companies like Zoom. There is only Cisco, VMware, and a few others. That's probably not a very large job sector, but telecommunications related to mobile, there are so many other aspects of it that are beyond these communication companies. Then, of course, you can see utilities, government, banking, right? So there is some of these segments. This is something I pulled out of Google from a Gartner report that came only about 4 or 5 days back. So that gives you an idea of where you can position yourself from a vertical standpoint. The next slide I'm going to show you, this is a bit dated. It's about 4 to 6 months old slide, but it kind of reflects which areas of the Salesforce ecosystem you want to be concentrating on. And in this case, as you can see, the highest growth in the last year has been field service. So field service lighting and service cloud, if you combine that. Of course, FSL is on top of service cloud. And then, of course, Heroku is okay. And the bigger numbers, you see Salesforce CPQ. There is a few other verticals. These are all public information that I've got. Yeah, you can search for Salesforce economy and get this. So I want to give you a vertical perspective and a horizontal perspective. Vertical meaning the industry, and horizontal meaning the tools within the Salesforce ecosystem that you want to concentrate on. And of course, Salesforce as a company itself is foraying into and has already forayed into some industries like financial services for a while. Manufacturing was last year. Consumer goods industry is last year plus this year. There was a third release of their consumer goods cloud that just came last week. And then of course retail, wholesale. There are a few other verticals that Salesforce already has entrenched, and of course health cloud, which is also a prominent piece of the Salesforce ecosystem. So I would suggest, apart from being developers or business analysts, you concentrate on certain aspects of this platform and ecosystem. Because when myself and the and my fellow panelist Velu got introduced to Salesforce, there was only Force.com platform, Sales Cloud, and Service Cloud, nothing else, right? So our scope for learning is very limited. It was easy, but now it's far bigger. It's at least 30 or 40 times bigger than what we were before, what we saw before. This is a slide that you would have seen multiple times. It gives you an idea of all the different certifications. I wanted to show one thing where if you look at the right side, the architects track. So if you're a developer and you want to differentiate yourself in the market, short term or long term, if you crack any of these exams, there is a pyramid you can see. If you just search on Google for Salesforce architect pyramid, you will see a pyramid, and there is left side of the pyramid is application architect, right architect. The right side is system architect, and both together they evolve into you becoming a CTA, which is certified technical architect. That only tests the platform. So the whole puzzle is so big, and you're only, as an architect, you're only dealing with these exams deal only with the Force.com platform and nothing beyond that. Doesn't deal with CPQ, B2B commerce, B2C commerce, Einstein analytics, all those other things, right? So you have to decide a certain direction, and I wanted to show you the architect direction, but that doesn't cover everything. You just for your idea. So if you become a certified architect, you in the process of it, it'll take you 2 or 3 years. Within that, on the job, you learn various other ecosystem components like CPQ or Commerce Cloud. That adds value to your entire certification career. That's what I want to emphasize. This slide talks about, as you can see, the rightmost is the architect certifications that I just mentioned. And then you have specialist certifications for CPQ. There's one, Pardot, there's Marketing Cloud. So there are various things, right? So there's a big ecosystem, and the way you navigate within it is also important. As you can see, there are some suggestions I have here on this slide. Of course, Trailheads you already know. Dreamforce, there is talk that Dreamforce might not happen this year, but at least for our knowledge or for our own benefit, the Trailhead X conference in San Francisco is going to happen in the next few weeks. You can check on the internet. It is virtual. So you can do a lot of learning from that, and Trailhead X is one of the best learning content conferences in the world. So I would strongly suggest you subscribe for that, and it probably will be free with you. I don't know the details, but you can register online and participate in that conference and attend that. So let's move on to our panel discussion. I wanted to throw these ideas at you all, and then we of course have one of my good friends and currently a senior director at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. He heads the Center of Excellence at that company. A very long time Salesforce veteran, almost 20 years into Salesforce. He's also the head of the Chicago developer group, and a very, very long career person, probably one of the oldest Salesforce guys I know. I've known him only after that, but 20 years is a long time. So, Velu, how are things in Chicago?
Pretty good, Andy. Thank you for having me today.
All right. So as I mentioned, you have lots of experience in Salesforce. I have about 12 years of Salesforce, and the first thing I did when I learned Salesforce was I was doing a proposal for a company called ADC Communications in Minneapolis. And to do that proposal, I had to learn the platform. So I went to a whole bunch of videos. Even at that time in 2008, when I did that, there were sizable number of videos, at least 100, 200 of them. There was a book, a PDF called Creating On-Demand Apps. There was a book called Salesforce Cookbook. About 15, 20 days, I was able to figure out what Salesforce is. And the beauty of the platform that I saw was the ability to create objects and fields, the ability to share records, like particularly the role-based hierarchy, the profiles, many of the application security tenets of the platform which exists today existed at that time itself. You've probably seen that too. And I know when I used to do Java, and for the Java developers here, I'm sure you know Groovy. And Groovy was a platform where you can write some Java classes with some fields. It'll create the automatic, it'll automatically create the database objects for you, the DAO classes, and all those things necessary for Oracle or MySQL or Postgres. And that was cool. But this is even cooler because it's all on a screen. It becomes much more simpler. So what attracted you, Palani, Velu, when you entered the system, the Salesforce ecosystem?
First of all, thank you for having me, everyone. Great presentation. I learned quite a bit today. There was a flow presentation, particularly was very well done. And then the other one, I could not follow 100% because I haven't touched the code for a while, but it brings back my memories. So I was able to refresh my skill set there a little bit. So my experience with Salesforce started in June 13, 2000. That's when I started. I've got my first instance or whatever that I signed up with Salesforce. Actually, at that time, there was nothing for me to be attracted to the product. I was using Microsoft Exchange Server, very old legacy system that many of you may not even have heard of it. I had to take a backup on my data that I was doing. I was running a consulting company, and then everything that I did, it was all on server and client server based. So when Salesforce sent me an email that, if you're tired of taking backup, can you consider using something called, they didn't use the word cloud those days. You can do it using internet or online. That's how I ended up using Salesforce. Since 2000, June, I have never looked back anything outside of Salesforce. My career all around Salesforce, ran a consulting firm. I ran a sales team, marketing team, service team. I had an onshore, offshore model to support my customers. So it was all about using Salesforce ecosystem. I developed an App Exchange product. Then when we finally exited the company 3 years ago, I sold the company to a large company, and I ended up going back to the corporate world, and I'm enjoying every bit of it. So it's a journey. Unlike today, if you look back 15, 20 years forward, now there is a lot of opportunity. I am so excited for people who are attending the call today. I don't think that this is the best time for you to learn something new on Salesforce. The opportunity is tremendous, and there are basics that you need to do. As you have seen the demo here, you need to learn, number one, the administration. Number two, whatever the platform developer that you have learned. From here, you can go wherever you want to go. So Andy, it was not more like what attracted. I just accidentally got into Salesforce very early in my career. And there are a lot of people who are starting your career, if you're early stage in your career, I think Salesforce platform will be a great platform to latch on to.
Okay, thank you for your interesting insight, Velu. I have known that in 2008 itself, Salesforce had a client called Japan Post. That was the largest customer for Salesforce, and they had 45,000 users way back in 2008.
Right.
I know State Farm has hundreds of thousands of users, and I know your company is also has a huge user base. But of course, Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think, is statewide, right? Each state has a different, or at least a club of states have Blue Cross Blue Shield brand, right? It's not one conglomerate like the other companies. So how do you use Salesforce? Can you give us some insight that'll be useful to us?
Right. I mean, I can't get to specifics because of the confidentiality, but I can tell you how we use Salesforce. We have several thousand users, several instances. When we use Salesforce, we use it for three purposes: sales, service, and marketing, right? So that is the ecosystem that Salesforce has been built. On top of it, if you have seen the demo, Samir, that you a couple of slides back, um, you showed the industry. So we are in the healthcare industry, specifically on the payer side, insurance information. When we look at insurance, whether it is in the US, I'm not 100% sure how it works in India, but when you are a large insurance company across multiple states, you have a lot of governance. So if you look at Salesforce, it's a huge platform with thousands and thousands of users, multiple instances. So the biggest challenge for us is to make sure that we are creating an excellent experience to the end users. Salesforce is not a cheap platform. It's pretty expensive. A lot of you know. So when you make such a kind of investment, and when you're trying to bring a good experience to the end users as well as your customers, in the payer industry, everything is called membership experience. If you're an insured person, you're called a member. So it's all translated into the membership. So coming back to Andy, it is all about providing the experience. So my job is to make sure that my team enables the customers, which are internal customers, to provide the best possible experience to the end users. End users could be a customer, which is an employer who wants to insure their employees, members who come to us on a regular basis. We have about 16 million members, insured people. So when they come to us, how well we provide them the service using the Health Cloud, the Service Cloud platform. And then we also have a lot of providers. Providers are nothing but the hospitals and individual doctors. So we bring them to our network so we can provide them the best possible onboarding experience. And then we have brokers who bring business to us. So typically in the insurance industry, I'm sure you all heard of the brokers, and then brokers bring a lot of business to us. So this is such a big ecosystem, and keep in mind, Salesforce has been there for 20 years, but these companies have been there for 40 years and 50 years, 60 years. So the transitioning into a modern platform like Salesforce for companies like, it's a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, but it's called Healthcare Services Corporation. There are so many other organizations. United Health is a very, very large company, and there is Anthem is a large company. These companies are large. So for them to use Salesforce, it's a big, big mind shift. It's a paradigm shift for them. So it is an ongoing challenge. The one thing, if they don't change, industry will teach them a big lesson. So we are all learning, and we are in the process of fast transformation. And that's my job, is to help to enable the transformation.
Okay, thank you for your insights. So it's all about digital transformation, particularly in post-COVID. There's going to be a lot of investment in that aspect.
Right.
To serve the customers in the most efficient way, right?
Right.
My next question is targeted towards, I want to hear from you how developers can nurture the ability to know more about what problems they are solving, because I've seen many developers go and ask them to write, right? So they don't interact with the business side very often enough, and particularly in this completely distributed workforce that we are going to face in the next few years. How does a developer or a team of developers get to know what they are solving in more detail than what they see on a storyboard. What is your career tips or career guidance as to people to progress their career in the right direction, not just code, but also understand their vertical, the problems they're solving, and various aspects?
Right. So no, that's a good topic we can discuss, and I think that'll take at least a couple of days for me to answer, but I'll make it as simple and as quickly as possible. Let me ask anybody who is presented today, Praveen or Srivatsav, how many developers are in the ecosystem according to Salesforce? Not Andy, but let me see whether any of your presenters answers this question.
Probably 10 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who looked at the last time as of yesterday? I didn't do it today. Went to the developer.salesforce.com. At the bottom, it says how many million members. Can somebody look at it right now and tell me? Go to developer.salesforce.com or a blog.
6.0 million developers.
There you go. We have 6 million developers according to Salesforce. So when you have 6 million developers, and if you're entering into Salesforce, so you will be 6 million plus. So there is huge amount of, these are people that Salesforce thinks are developers. I'm pretty sure there will be a lot more developers out there than what Salesforce tells you. Like, I consider myself as a developer too. Once upon a time, I used to code. So what does it mean for specifically people who want to go into the develop? So developer is an entry. It is that is how I look at it. It's an entry to get into a corporation is a developer. So when you get into you can always, what happens in the, even today, many countries, if you are a graduate student or undergraduate student as a computer science, it's easy to get into a company if you have a good grade skill, good grades, and so on and so forth. But if you are so people who have already been working and they want to change their career into a Salesforce career, and they have already worked as a developer or they've been working as a developer, so they can get into the Salesforce ecosystem. But the simplest way for you to do, there are things that as a developer or anybody, Salesforce, once you get into the Salesforce ecosystem, the biggest challenge for all of us, including Andy and I, how do I focus? Where do I go? What do I do? And this is also going to change as you progress in your career. If you go back, Andy, can you go back to a couple of slides?
Which one? Okay.
Can you go back to a couple of slides? There was a.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this one. This is perfect. No, that slide. No, the one you had tables and columns, right? The path.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Go for.
Sure.
Yeah, this
you
one.
See that?
So.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this is an excellent slide. I actually would like to have this slide, if you don't mind, just for my own education, just a reminder. So this is if you look at it, developer, advanced consultant, marketing, and to me there is an opportunity, also a distraction. I've seen people taking 15 certifications, 25 certifications, but how do I use the skills? Where do I go and use the skills? This is where you go back to the one. Can you go back to one slide, one more slide, the industry where you showed financial services cloud? Yes. So you pick a track, whether you are a consultant, whether you're a developer or an admin. To me, to be successful, what Salesforce for the last 4 years, from 2016 onwards, they have started specializing in the industries. So as Andy said, as you remember, Andy, you said 10 years ago, it was a sales cloud and service cloud. When I started, it was only 5 or 6 tabs. And I never paid a single dollar for a 3-4 years for Salesforce. Actually, for first 2 years, I didn't pay anything. After that, my licensing cost was $5 per user per month. Now you can imagine it's $400. If you can go as much as $400. So right now, if you want to speed up your career, pick a track, either a developer or a consultant, whichever you like it. But I always, if you're a brand new entry into the Salesforce ecosystem, I would go with an admin and developer and pick an industry, but learn about the industry. If you're a developer, I think Praveen, was it Praveen did the flow?
Yep.
Right. So when you, Praveen, if you look at the flow, you have you have done a great job of explaining. But imagine if you can understand why you are doing it. For example, if you are there in the healthcare industry, how does healthcare industry work? Everything that you do inside Salesforce, every code you touch, you are touching ultimately the bottom line of the company. So in the Sales Cloud, let me ask people here, what is the most important opportunity object in the Sales Cloud?
I think you gave away the answer. It's opportunity.
There you go. So I think there's accidentally gave away the answer, but it is a good answer, I guess. So, but if you are as a developer, Andy, if you're looking at developing, if you're suggesting people to develop the skills, be competitive, learn the industry. Salesforce has got a lot of trails on Trailhead. You can start looking at financial services cloud or healthcare because the customer, as you've seen the progression, some of you have been working for 3 years, some of you have been working for 10 years, some of you are newer people has got a lot more opportunity because you're jumping directly into the industry trend. So I would look at a specific track, specific industry, and also choose a mentor. Have a good mentor. There are a lot of people out there in the industry, so they can help you to guide you. And I think that is my recommendation, Andy. And as you progress, you can always change. You know, things will change, your interest will change, and then you can accordingly position yourself. So that's my 2 cents onto how you stay competitive. At the same time, it is more than competitive, it is how satisfied are you in doing what you're doing. It's not writing a flow, but behind the flow, how am I contributing to the bottom line of the company, which is the revenue, or how am I contributing to solve the customer service problems quickly? So if you can tie that what you're doing, I think that will be very, very powerful for you as a to when you are building your career. So that's my 2 cents, Andy.
Thank you. Well, the last point was very, very relevant, right? How what you're doing is aligning with the company's vision as well as the customer's vision, right? So if you don't satisfy the customer, if you're a consulting company, we don't get income. While if you work for a direct company, then obviously what we do aligns with what they do, and there has to be a fairly strong alignment. Thank you very much. This now comes our last question. I know you volunteer a lot, right? I mean, apart from your full-time job as a senior director, you also do volunteer in the Salesforce community as a group leader, as well as the Tamil community of Chicago. I remember last July when I was there at the Federation of Tamil Singers of North America convention, you presented very nicely the first opening session of the second day. So how are you able to juggle your balls around?
I think it's just the attitude, Andy. I don't know whether we all have a limited time. Everybody has limited time, and everybody's. I'm at the stage where giving back is much more important to me than just taking. Give me versus what can I give, and the the ecosystem has helped me as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a corporate leader. It contributed a lot. Many people in my career mentored me, coached me, helped me, supported me every way. So I thought for the last 10 years, I've been always, my mindset is all about, okay, how can I help? It's not for the help for the sake of helping, just getting involved and make that as a part of your life. I spend quite a bit of time reading. I attended yesterday one YouTube group. I learned about the extensions. Salesforce, if you're using Visual Studio, there are a lot of extensions that you can do. So when I go back to my work, then I can work with my architect. Okay, can we look at these kind of things? So I think just the simple attitude and being humble in there is a lot of people can take help from you, especially in the COVID-19 situation. There's a lot of need out there. So I think just having that attitude, prioritizing your day-to-day life. One thing that I do, if you look at everybody's, we all have smartphones, but we use smartphones most of the time on WhatsApp or Facebook. So one thing I did, I removed my Facebook from my cell phone. I don't look at my WhatsApp. I completely turned off my WhatsApp notification so that I get less distraction. And I'm sure we all have that biggest distractions is the Facebook and WhatsApp. I'm not against WhatsApp. I'm not against Facebook. But can I spend some time wisely by reading a Tailhead module or go to a Harvard Business Review to read something so that we can give it back? And there is a lot of virtual volunteer that people need help. So I spend some time there. User group is something that I've been doing it for the last 8 years or so. It's just the prioritizing it. It's nothing right or wrong. And fortunately, my family supports very well. My wife, she's a big supporter of Salesforce ecosystem. So we both talk quite a bit about Salesforce. So my son is in college, so which means less distraction at home. And right now, COVID-19, you have a lot of time in your hand. So that is something that helps me.
Okay. Thank you for your excellent guidance today, Velu. We really appreciate your time. I would like to close this by mentioning one person. She was in our first admin class, a lady called Suganti Satyamurthy. She's from Pennsylvania. And what she did was, I think about 10 days after the class, sometime in May, she passed the exam, just the basic admin exam. She's a practicing BA and PM. And then she did a seminar, just a 1-hour seminar of her learnings and her experiences in passing the admin. She produced a PDF and published it. So I would urge the people who continue to be in this ecosystem, who are in this class, to please do such sessions and contribute back to the community. Thank you very much. After you, Praveen.
Thank you, Andy. So let me take over.
So,
Andy, can you stop sharing your screen?
Praveen, hold on a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So hello everyone. So this is Poonima from Software. So I'm going to talk about the a free webinar on what is all the fuss about Tableau that Software is conducting on June 2. This is a free webinar about what is Tableau and what is the power of data and what is data analytics and what data visualization is. And this is going to be presented by Ashwath Raj. So he's a Tableau certified professional and he's a passionate Tableau trainer also. So he has done various workshops for the Computer Society of India and Great Lakes Institute of Management. So this is a free webinar. So this is targeted to anyone who's interested to learn about Tableau and the different features and use cases. So there is a 11-day workshop which is going to start on June 4th, and it's a 14-day workshop. You can attend the free webinar on Tuesday, and If you're interested, you can go ahead and register for the Tableau workshop, the 14-day workshop. I'll just send out the link to the workshop details. You can go through, and the people who are interested, you can go ahead and register. Thank you. Praveen, you can go ahead and continue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen. Okay, thank you again. Now, this is the third part of the session. We are going to see what are lightning components. Forward-looking statement. I'm going to skip this for now. Okay, so before going into what this lightning component is all about, first we need to understand what is a component. And we all know that how computer evolved into a powerful consumer machine, which we are using right now. But all these, one second. Okay, yeah. So, and we are correct. We all know, right, how computer evolved into a powerful computing machine that we are currently using now. And but if you go back like in the early 2000s, most of the work done most of the work that is done on the website is it's mostly on the server side. So in the early 2000s, if you are using a computer and if you're trying to access IE or any browser like Firefox, if you can see, right, it as far as the presentation goes, it will be very simple. But behind the scene, the content provider has a lot of servers that does a lot of processing in order to like render the result onto the web. And since the majority of the work that was done on the server, and to solve most of the problems like huge code base and maintenance, people started using design patterns to solve all their server side problems and application maintenance. But the most important problem, what was fundamentally there is on the UI, things like code reuse and code maintenance was very little. And that's went on for a while. And when web adoption became popular, the fundamental problems of code maintenance, or because at the end of the day, as a web developer, when you are in 2006 or 2007, if you want a piece of functionality across multiple pages, what generally would people would do is they'll copy paste it everywhere instead of it being in a single place which can be referred across multiple pages. There weren't any sort of a pattern there as far as web development is concerned. But as far as server side applications are concerned, like Java, JSP, they had like sophisticated mechanisms to share data as well as maintain code. And that is when like tech companies and web community, they came up with libraries like jQuery and framework like AngularJS to solve the fundamental problems in building web applications. And fast forward, what really happened is it was good for some time, and that's when people realized like they need more intuitive solution to to handle the functionalities in the web. And that's when the concept of components came into picture. And the components are nothing but reusable UI components in the web, which can be utilized across multiple pages. So it is like using a video tag in your page, and the same video tag can be also used in another page. And based on the value that you pass to the video tag, it behaves differently in a page. So that is fundamentally what a component is. And companies like Angular and React and Facebook, they started leveraging the concept of components and started creating frameworks to solve modern UI problems. And what fundamentally what happened is developers like web developers or JavaScript developers, they started leveraging the components approach to promote reusability. And also they like break their application into smaller parts so that the code base becomes manageable, as well as the features becomes manageable. Because if you are going to take a feature away, it is like, removing the component, that's it. So no dependencies will be there, because most of the components, they interact loosely with one another. And in the same line, Salesforce did recognize the problem, in the meanwhile, when they were like trying to introduce a new a development framework in Salesforce ecosystem. And that's when the component based approach was, that is something that was commonly talked about in the web community. And Salesforce also leveraged, they use the same approach, component based approach, in order to develop an application framework in Salesforce, which is called Lightning Component. So Lightning Component, at the end of the day, it is a UI framework, to develop dynamic applications. So when you say dynamic, and it is quite familiar that we are going to use JavaScript, because in order for a web application to be dynamic, you need the help of a JavaScript. And it can also work with mobile and desktop devices. Yes, of course, through your mobile, you can definitely see a website, right? So that it's pretty common. And also, if you look at the applications that are being developed, they use, single page application, which I'll talk in a minute. And also, in addition to that, Lightning Component uses JavaScript as a front end layer, and behind the scene, in order to like get the data, Lightning Component uses Apex. Okay, this is the normal architecture of an application. So you saw how the Visual Force page operates, right? Visual Force uses traditional architecture, where every time when you hit a URL, the browser, which is the client, would send a request to a server, and in return, it would send a raw HTML file, which has to be translated by the web browser, and it will be presented in the screen. And whenever you click on a button, everything will be sent as an HTML post, and then the resulting result would be returned as an HTML. And that really requires the whole page to be reloaded again. But in single page applications, so every unit, every unit that you see, or every little UI you see on your web application, are like separate components, which is capable of like communicating with the server independently without the whole page to be reloaded again. So the initial request, when it goes to the server, it provides all the details that is really necessary for that particular UI to get loaded. And what happens is, behind the scene, each component would invoke, would contact the server through ajax request, and all the data transportation mechanism, they use JSON as a mode of transport to to get back the data, as well as send the data back to the server. So if a particular UI or particular piece of code, UI, that needs to be changed, and you don't need the whole page to refresh again, the whole piece, that particular piece can like contact the server, and it can return back, and it can refresh its own UI. So components are the future, because I've told you, right? Polymer is one of the famous framework by Google to develop component-based web application, and Angular is also a full-blown web application framework. And React, even though it's a library, it also promotes component-based architecture. And the same line, we also have Lightning Component, which you can use to develop a modern UI inside Salesforce, which also uses component-based architecture. One second. Okay. Okay, and this is how when you create a Lightning component, it contains a lot of files. So it contains component, controller, helper, and style, and documentation, renderer, and so on. And the component is the place where you enter your UI markup. If you want to add a div tag or paragraph tag or even a video tag, you have to add all your HTML markup on the component file. And on the controller is where you handle your events. Say for example, you have added a button, you have a form with, like, 3 input boxes, and upon clicking on a button called save, you need to access all the data that you have entered on the form. So through JavaScript controller, you can access all the data that is entered in the UI. And if you have any reusable logic that can be invoked from your controller, you can use helper. And the main reason why we have helper is because a controller method cannot call another controller method. So you need the help of an helper to call a logic that can be used in multiple places. And it has its own CSS file. So the main reason why it is mentioned as encapsulated CSS file is because all the style that you add to your component cannot it cannot interfere with the component that is there in the UI, right? So whatever you develop or whatever you include in the CSS file will stay within the component itself. So it won't affect your global CSS configuration. And design attribute, you can like expose global variables, which can which can define the behavior of your component. I'll show it in the demo how you can add design attributes or in your component. And in your CSS file, this let us say this is the markup that I have. And on your CSS file, if you're creating for your component, this is how it should start. So it should always, your CSS markup should always start with dot this, and you should add the element that you're targeting, and the appropriate style can be included within the braces. So this is how it is. Okay. So let us say, for example, if you're targeting a style that needs to be included for all the UI in your component, then if I had this line and if I set background color to yellow, then this particular information, when it gets displayed on the UI, you can see that the UL portion will be in yellow in color. Okay. The same way you can specifically target for element using the CSS conventions. And when we talk about component, we need a place where we need to store data, right? So user has entered the data on the UI, but you need to access the data, right? I mean, that's where component comes in. Imagine attributes are like, a member. Say, for example, a component is a class, and a class can contain variables as well as methods. And similarly, a component is a class. Similarly, like in members, okay, sorry, one second. Okay. An attribute is there's a place where you store all the data, and all the data. And like in class, every time when you create an instance of a class, and if you need to maintain a property, or if you need to maintain a data, you would expose a member variable like a string point or string first name, string last name. Similarly, if you want to maintain a data on your component, you need to expose an attribute and maintain the data over there. And we have a feature called data embedding. So every time when you enter a data on the UI, it can be like, it can sync with the data that is there in the attribute. So we have something called two-way binding, where every time, say for example, if I enter, if on the UI input number, it is a lightning component tag which would accept only numbers. And if I type in 1 2 3, automatically what the framework would do is it would bind the value to v.price, the actual attribute over here. And actions, I told you, right? On the controller, we can like listen for user events. Say for example, if you click on a button, if you really want to like access the value of the button, value that got entered, you can access it in the controller. Say for example, I have a very attribute called counter, and its type is number, and the default value is 0. And if I click on a button called click me, what would happen is it would invoke a method called handle click. And over here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the value of the counter, which is by default is 0. So over here, I'm incrementing 0 plus 1. And I'm setting the counter back again. So what happens is, due to data binding property, whatever value you set in a controller gets reflected back on your UI. Accessing server data. I mean, it's really important that you bring all your, say for example, there are requirements where you have to build your own list views, or you have to build your own forms, like where the user can interact with. So in one of the demos, you saw how Yashwant was able to query the account record through an extension controller and show it on the UI. The same way we can also do it in Lightning component, where in order to like store the values that we get from the server, you need to expose an attribute called name equal to account. And since we are dealing with the collection of type account, the type is account, and this is the collection identifier. And we have handlers called unit handlers. So imagine unit handlers are a control, are for each class we have a controller, right, which gets executed every time when you create an instance of your class. Similarly, on your component, we have something called init handler, which gets called every time a component gets created. So if you look at the line over here, we have called init handler name equal value equal to this, and we have an action which defines what method we have to call. So over here we are calling do init method, and what happens is, we on the Apex controller, we have a method called find all, and we are creating an instance of the find all method in the JavaScript code, and we are attaching a callback method called function of a, which gets executed as soon as the server request is done. And in addition to that, we have a line called $a.enqueue action. The main reason why we have $a.enqueue action is because the way Salesforce process all the server requests, they queue them into a container, and they would process them one by one. So in order to like add your request to your queue, you have to call your method. And as soon as when the result, when a Lightning component is able to retrieve the result, a function gets called. The whatever function that you pass as the callback, it gets called. And we have few properties called in a component.isValid and a dot. And if you see here on the function, we have a variable called a. It can be anything else. So if the request was successful, through get state, you can see if what's the state of the request. So it can be successful, it can be failure, it can be aborted. So if the request was successful, you will get successful. And in order to get the actual data from the server that is returned, you can get it through a dot get return value, and you can assign it back to accounts, which I'll show you in the demo. Component communication. Um, Now that let us say you're building a large application, and you're componentizing your small features into components. Sometimes your component needs to talk to one another, so it's really important, right? And in order to facilitate that, Lightning component has its own event driven communication system in place. And there are like two type of events in place. One is application event, the other one is component event. And this is how a in order to like create an event, you have to like you create a component, you have to separately create an event definition, which has its own type. If it is an application event, then you will give it as application. But if it is a component event, then instead of application, you will like give it as component. And also, not only that, event also can carry information as well. So in order to like carry information, I told you, like in order to like hold information inside a component, you need the help of an attribute. The same way, for an event to hold the attribute of to hold the data, you need an aura attribute. So you can declare an aura attribute of any type over here. Component event usually works in the containment hierarchy, which I'll show it now. So let us say I have a parent component or a child component, and a component that is creating the event should have a register event tag. Okay, and it should fire the event, and the parent that sits on top of it, the receiver, will need to have an handler, so that every time when you fire an event, all the handlers that listen for this event can handle the information. But in the case of an application event, any event that has the name of the handler can handle it. So it does not respect the component hierarchy, which I'll show it in a demo. So imagine this. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. So what I did is we have two data model, like I said in the flow presentation. We have trips and we have vehicles. What I did is, through Lightning component, I have developed a code that would query all the trips, and it would list in this card format. And also I have you know uh, enabled option to edit a trip information. So if I click on a trip, I can edit all the details I want. And if I click on save, the record gets updated. So let me like dive into the code. Before that, let me show you a simple example of how data binding works. So data binding is one of the features that is available in Salesforce that would help you to directly bind the values that you enter in your UI with the actual value that is maintained at the attribute level. So if I give hello world, because of the data binding feature, whatever I enter on this input box, it's binded to the actual attribute which is displayed, whose value is also displayed here. So if you see here on my component, I have an attribute called greeting of type text, and I have an input box of type text, and value equal to b dot greeting. I'm binding the aura attribute to this value attribute, and I've also given the label for the input box. So if I see if it's greeting, so that it is greeting over here. And if I set even I can set a default value here over here. So let me set hello world at the very beginning, and we'll not change it after it loads. So by default, the value of greeting is hello world, which gets binded over here, even on the markup itself. So if I change it to 1, 2, 3, see how powerful Aura is. Every time on every keystroke, what happens is Aura listens for the keystroke event for that happens on the input box, and it directly binds to the attribute that is tied to this input box. Okay. Now let us go back to the trip manager. So trip manager, initially what it does is it shows you a list of trips, and this is the component that queries the list of trip and displays it on the UI. So let us look at the component. So like I told you, in order to like generate a list of trips over here, I need to hold the value, right, in memory. So I have an attribute called trips of type list, and the default value is empty. And also told you like on class we have controller, right? Sorry, a constructor. And similarly, for component we have do init handler, which gets called every time the component gets loaded. So when the trip list component is created, what happens is Aura would call a method called doInit. On the doInit, we are creating an instance of a method called getAllTrip, which belongs to this controller. So let me open up the controller and show you. On the controller, I have a simple method called getAllTrips, which queries all the trips and return a list of trips as a collection input. Okay. Now that I've created the instance of the method that I'm going to invoke, I'm attaching a callback which gets invoked as soon as the request is completed. And I'm adding the action to the queue so that the Salesforce can process my request. As soon as the request is processed, you can see this function gets called. So what I'll do is I'll add an alert. Got result from server. See, got result from server. You can see the alert, right? So Salesforce is calling the callback, which means, okay, the request has been completed and we need to check the status of the request as well. So without any problem, we are able to receive the data. And now that we got the data, we have to get the data, the actual data that is that is contained on this variable. So you can access the data from through get return value method. So which would return the collection of trips that is returned by the server, right? And what I'm trying to do here is I have an iteration tag similar to for loop. We do have tags like iteration, which would help us to iterate over a collection and print the result accordingly. So if you can see, I'm able to iterate over trip. I'm storing it in a temporary variable called trip, and displaying the value of type, seats, and even the vehicle associated with the trip. That gets displayed over here. Okay, now I'm able to see the list view. Now I have to edit the list. Now let us see what happens when I click on edit. I can see a form which has few fields, right? So we'll see over here what happens when I click on the edit button. So if you can see here on the actions, I have an edit button, right? Edit trip. So when I click on edit, on click gets fired, and the edit trip, which is on the controller, gets called. And I'm creating an event. I told you trip manager is the main component, and it contains two child components, trip view and trip list. Since they are in an hierarchy, I can use component event to communicate trip list to the trip manager. So over here, what I'm doing is, in order to create an event, first I have to create the event definition. So in order to create an event definition, you can go to file, new, lightning event. You can give trip event name or trip action. This is how you create an event. By default, the type is application. And if you want to change it to component event, you can change it. And if you need the event to carry any payload information to its parent component, then you can give name equal to event, type equal to string. Now for me, in order to like make this edit work, I need the ID of the trip, right? So what I'm doing is, on the trip list, I have already created an event. So I'll show you the structure of the event. It contains the event name and payload information, which is an object. So what I'm doing is I'm passing the whole trip to the trip manager, who is the parent of the trip list. So over here, I have this line component.get event of edit trip. Every event should have its own name. So that is how the handler, who is the parent, can identify if it is being called or not. And I'm adding the payload information over here. So event name is edit, and payload is the trip that got clicked, and event.fire. This method is really compulsory. If you comment out this method, the event will not fire. Now the event is fired. And what happens is I have an handler for the same event, and what happens is switch action, the switch view, which is tied to the action attribute, gets called. And if it is edit, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, now that I've sent the event, I've handled it here, I need to extract the payload information, right? So what I can do is through get.event param, I can get the whole trip information. And all I need is the ID of the trip so that I can display this form. So if the event is edit, all I need is trip.id. I'm setting it to the trip ID. And as soon as the trip ID is set, I have an expression here that, if it is true, then this whole view, the trip list, will be hidden from the UI. I mean, that's what is happening over here. If I click on edit, the whole trip list view is getting hidden, right? So the expressions behind the scene gets evaluated every time when an attribute referred in the expression is changed. So over here, I'm setting the value of trip ID. If it is true, then we are adding SLDS side, which in turn hides the whole DOM. And we have another attribute called aura-if, and only if it is true, the trip view will be shown in the UI. So since we are setting the trip ID, the trip view component gets displayed. I'm passing the trip ID to the trip view. Now let us look at how the trip view is configured. Now if you see here, I'm passing the trip ID, and I'm using a native component that is provided by Salesforce in order to build an UI. So all I need to do is I need to pass the object name and ID of the record, and also I need to specify the fields that I wanted to display. So automatically what Salesforce would do is it would query with, see, if you see here, I don't have a controller over here, and I didn't even pass the whole trip object here itself. So all I'm trying to do here is pass an ID so that I can inform the record edit form, which is a native component, a standard component that is provided by Salesforce, which it would instruct based on the ID. It would query all these fields: trip, vehicle, seat, without writing a single line of Apex code. What Salesforce can do is, through its own data service, based on the ID that is passed and the object name that is given, it can query all the fields that is specified here and render them like this. And even in order to save the values, see, in order to save the values, what I'm trying to do here is, all I have to do is type equal to submit and label equal to say. I'm just creating a normal button, and and the type of the button is submit. That is all is enough for the component to listen for an event called type submit and save the record. That's pretty much it what we have to do. And as soon as the record got saved, we have to really inform the list, right? The list, so that it can refresh that particular record. So as soon as the button gets clicked, as soon as the button gets clicked, Salesforce internally recognizes, okay, this is a submit action, and it would save the records. And once the commit is successful, we have an handler called handle success, which gets called. So upon success, a method on the controller gets called. So handle success. Over here, what I'm trying to do is I'm passing the whole payload information, the whole trip information that is required over here. I'm constructing the trip information, and again, I'm using component event equal to submit, and I'm sending the whole trip as the payload. So due to component hierarchy, we know that on the trip manager is the parent of the trip view. So trip event, if you see here, the name of the event is trip event. This gets handled, and we are again calling the switch view. And if the event name is submit, what I'm doing is I'm emptying the value of the trip ID. So as a result, what happens is the trip view gets hidden and the trip list gets shown again, because the expression is evaluates to false. As a result, we are applying SLDS show class, which eventually shows the whole the whole list view back in the UI. And in addition to that, we have also exposed a method on the component. So if you look at, if you compare a component with a class, it has member variables and member functions. So attributes, they act as member variable, and similarly we can expose a function on a component. So what I'm trying to do here is I have to update the trip back, right? So I have exposed a method called update trip, and I'm passing the updated trip information. Now, if you see here, what I'm finding, component at find of trip, I have an ID over here, or ID equal to trips. I'm finding the component. So component at find, what it returns is it returns the instance of the component that is in memory, and through that I can access the properties of the component as well as the method of the component. Over here, I'm directly accessing the method. So I'm calling the update trip. On the list view, I have a method called update trip, which calls the update trip again on the controller, and so this method gets called, and behind the scene what happens is I'm trying to find out which ID got updated. I'm replacing the instance of the payload with the existing item in the list, and setting the trip back, trip list, the updated trip list back. As a result, whatever changes that I did gets reflected on the UI. Right? So if I go and edit type to round trip, and if I change the C to 51, save, that type, the value of type got changed and the value of seat got changed. So this is the place where we are actually updating the core list, that updates, that shows up the whole trip list in the UI. So this is how powerful the lightning component is. And you saw, like, using Apex, we are able to get the result from the server, And even without writing a single line of code on the Apex controller, we are able to create, we are able to update record. Even we can even create record if you don't pass an trip ID. If you click on submit, what Salesforce would do is it would create a record instead of updating the record, and it would return the result back. Even that is also possible. So Salesforce has provide us a mix of options where, as a developer, you can really use in order to build complex applications in infos.com. Coming back, I hope the session was really informational, and thank you. Over to you, Yashwant.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. That's a wonderful recap of LC. And so, all right. Again, welcome back to you guys for the final session of the final day of your developer training. And this is Ashwant again.
Yashwant, Yashwant, I know there is a lot of expectation on LWC. If it spills over a few more minutes, I think our audience will be willing to wait and listen to you. So please don't cut short your presentation.
Sure, Andy. Thank you. Yeah, and today we will be going to discuss or see about what is LWC. So most of you heard or uh, LWC is one of the greatest and hottest topic in the developer aspect. So, and one of the focus areas during the PD1 exam and understanding the easy of essence. So even there are a lot of requirements even coming from our clients when compared with the traditional Visual Force development. So what is LWC? I mean Lightning Web Component. So I'm skipping these few slides. And so what is LWC? So let's get started over here. LWC is I'm referring few times like LWC is like nothing but Lightning Web Component. It's a modern web standard. So if you like whatever Praveen given an overview of how systems are evolving and how systems are working currently, and the same way the browsers also gets updated to support with the same systems. So previously Lightning Web Component supports with a better performance, and it has all the modern web standards like the how Praveen navigator or given overview on custom elements like our componentization. And another thing is mobile first approach. So, and coming to web standards, there is something called custom elements. So previously in ECMAScript 5, you don't have an ability to create your own custom elements. So for that, now currently browsers are supporting even the custom elements, and Shadow DOM is the one of the main feature of the modern web standards. And ES6, and if you someone already have an idea about or you are already working in the JavaScript related areas, you might have already heard about ES6 and ES7. So those are all are in the Lightning Web Component, and it's already compatible. So far we have seen about VF Page and Aura. So what happened to Aura if LWC comes into the picture? So same thing, it's already compatible with Aura and easy of use. So now in all our mind today we seen about Visual Force page and Lightning Component and Lightning Web Component. So why Salesforce introduced a Lightning Web Component right now? So let's see that. So if I take you guys back to the 5 years or 4 years, 6 years back, this is how 2014 web stack is like Praveen said, all our whatever we are writing is, it's by end of the day it's going to execute in the browser. So this is how the web standards previously we had in the 2014 earlier days. So we have only ECMAScript 5, and we have standard events like button click events and on changer like that, and standard elements and few rendering. So what's missing here? If you see here, there is no data services, there is no component model and templates. If you guys might have already worked in Angular or React kind of things, you might have already heard about templates and modules. So these are main two modules of or main topics for any of the framework. So to fill all these kind of gaps, few already languages becoming as a framework, like you might have already about React, Angular, Aura, and AMD Common. So all these are to fill these gaps in the web standards, these frameworks become popular, and they started doing their own development from the scratch. And lack of rendering optimization, maybe if you see like delaying of the UI whenever you're rendering in the browser, or it's not even supporting the mobile. So all these like we have in the 2014 times. So now let's see what we had in the 2019. So this is where, if you see the web standards, they evolved a lot when it's compared with how machines are evolving daily, like our computers or PCs. So the same browser also need to support the machine. So that's why web standards also get updated. If you see, ECMAScript 7 is the latest or JavaScript update. And if you do see here, there are shadow DOM as well as standard elements and templates and custom elements. So all these came into the picture, and web standards, it's the web browser wherever the application is running is going to support our you don't need to write any code to support all this. So then framework's job is becoming less. Most of the logics are handling by the browser itself. So what framework you need to do is data services. So each and every framework, they should have their own data service and UI components. So if you see here, so more standards, and browser is taking care of all your code instead of you writing from the scratch. And in that case, if your framework is involved between the web browser and your application, what will happen is the browser will understand your code. So framework will convert to the browser understandability, and because of all these, it will take some a bit time rather than the normal what you are viewing currently. So that's why 2019 the web standards are get updated, and they have bring all the they are handling most of our scenarios what we had like in 2014. So let's have a comparison here what we have in LWC. So whatever you're seeing in the left hand side is LWC standard web standard stack, and what we Salesforce providing here. So as you guys already known about the Salesforce is the main one, and one of the main is security. I'm sorry, yeah, security. And the lightning data service is something which Praveen already talked about, like to bring the data without any Salesforce interact without any Apex control interaction. And base lightning components, Salesforce will provide like 70 plus standard components where you don't need to write any code. You just utilize the component, and you can use of that component here. So let's see the evolution of Salesforce. So most of our developers who are already working in from past 5 or 10 years old might have known what is S control and what is VF page. I think already discussed about VF page. So in 2010 up to till 2010 we have something called S control, which I didn't even discuss today. So which you where we can customize our UI. Then after 2010 there is something called, which we already discussed about, VF page in 2006. Then after we are the Praveen said, in the single page application, each and every time VF page will deal with rendering of server, and it will go each and every for server actions. So then Aura came into the picture. Whenever the web standards gets updated, Aura came into the picture, and Salesforce started developing their own framework. And most of our code is handling in the JavaScript. Then for server actions and for server interactions, we are dealing with the server. And 2018, like November, December days, LWC is the came into the picture. And this is one of the hottest topic, and one of the developer friendly environment where you are dealing, even you are working with multiple frameworks like React, or you already worked in React or Angular. So it can be easily understandable by any of the developers. That is the one main feature in the LWC. And let's see how Aura versus LWC. So far Praveen discussed about LC, which is nothing but lightning component, which is built on top of Aura framework. So what will happen to the Aura framework now? Will it go away, or will it will Salesforce will get rid of support for Aura? No, because if you see, ECMAScript 5 is in supporting in Aura, and ECMAScript 7 is a JavaScript standard which is currently available in 2019. So whatever we already discussed about in last earlier slides, so all these are built in Aura. Whatever you're seeing in the blue color are built on top of browser standards, which is built by Salesforce in Aura framework. Whatever you're seeing in the light orange color is supporting by browser. So previously we are Salesforce is take care of all these actions, excuse me, yeah, on top of Aura framework on top of web standard. So that is built by Aura framework. So now browser is taking care of all these actions, and our job is, Salesforce job is just to take care of few things like security, data service, and base lightning component. So now the UI rendering is becoming very faster, and the server interactions and rendering of the data in the DOM is becoming very faster when compared with Aura. So what will happen to Aura? Can we able to invoke LWC in the Aura? Yes. So you can even write your LWC, and you can also inject that LWC in the lightning component, and it's interoperable. You can even also have lightning component, lightning web component in the single page itself. Even end user or a developer will not able to identify what is the lag in the LC or what is the lag in the LWC. So it's interoperable and it's coexistence. Aura is much faster than VF page because it's evolved in 2014. As you remember, the evolution of UI, and LWC is much faster than Aura because of web browser is taking care of most of our things. Yeah, sorry. So before we start how to develop LWC, there are some prerequisites to develop. Neither like Aura component or neither like a VF page, you couldn't develop any of the code directly in your Salesforce app. You should use any of the tools like either VS Code or IntelliJ or uh, Eclipse. You have to use some of the tool. VS Code, Visual Studio Code is the one which Salesforce recommended, which has all the latest updates with the Salesforce, and JDK, which is you might have already seen, and CLI is the main powerful tool which is built by Salesforce to deal with to interact with using commands. So let's see how we can build this. So I'm not currently dealing with all these installation. Currently I installed Visual Studio Code in my machine, and I set up uh, I set up one project here. I'll just walk you through how to set up a project. So in the Windows or Mac, there is something called command palette. If you click on here, so yeah, before I think I'll go. So in the Visual Studio Code, after you install Visual Studio Code, you have to add these two extensions, which are Salesforce extension pack is the required one to connect with the Salesforce, and Salesforce Lightning Code snippets is a recommended one to get much familiar with the developer for using while developing code. So let's see how I install Visual Studio Code. If you see in here right hand side, left hand side, there is something called extensions. If you click on this, you will see all the list of extensions. So you can select Salesforce extension pack here, so which has all the Salesforce recommended extensions, and which I like I gave an idea on Salesforce Lightning Code snippets, which is easy for developers. And after that you have to install CLI. So now we have been ready with all the setup and all the stuff. Now how to create a project here. So before you're starting your development, you have to create your project, and you have to connect your project with your uh, Salesforce organization. So in the view, like as I said previously, command palette, in the Windows or in the Mac, you can use Command Shift P or Control Shift P, and here type create project with manifest. So it will ask you whether which template you can choose standard, and you can give the project name, which will directly, for time saving, I created a project which will create a project for Salesforce project, which is a DX project. You might have already heard about this DX. If not, DX is something Salesforce introduced recently with Lightning. So where you can changing the way of your development and way of your deployment. So here you create a project, and here what it will give you is it will create a project with a DX structure. If you see the left hand side, all these are in the DX structure. So now if you see the Force app, something called Force app, it is the project which I underneath this Force app main default, all our Salesforce belongings are Salesforce related modules are here. So now what we need to do is we created a project. We have to connect our project with Salesforce org, right? So because previously you can directly you're developing directly in the Lightning developer console in the Salesforce org. So now how can I connect my Salesforce org from the Visual Studio Code? Same thing, go to the command palette, and here type authorize an org, and here you will see a command which is already listed out here. So you need to choose which org, whether you are dealing with a production or sandbox or custom UI. For now, I'm choosing project default, and you have to give the alias name for the org. So which will take you to the, let me provide you one here, dev training, dev demo training. So if you see here, yeah, this will navigate back us to the Salesforce login screen where we usually used to log in. And here you can use give username and password, and that's it. You don't need to have any Salesforce your org after that until and unless you want to see your output. So for now, I just already created a project and I connected with my org. So whatever commands, either you can even communicate with your server or Salesforce organization using commands, or you can even deal with the UI. So here, if you see my whatever I org is connected, it will be listed out here. This is org which I created connected previously, which is dev training. So now my org is set up and I set up all my entire project. Now I need to write my code. So if you expand this in the Force app main default, you do see something called Aura, which Praveen talked about already, and LWC. So this is where we'll deal with. So here in the LWC, right click on LWC project, LWC folder, and choose create lightning web component. So whatever you're doing, previously you create lightning component from the developer console, here you will deal from here. So let's click on create lightning web component. I'm choosing the same file like hello world, and you have to choose your path. So I'm choosing the same default path as LWC, and that's it. It will create a lightning web component project for component for you. And if you expand this, you will see only two modules, two files underneath this. So this is my component. Underneath this, I'm having .html and .js and meta file. Let's talk about this later. First, let's see what is HTML. So if you remember, if you recall, in the lightning component, we do see a lot of files like SVG and all this stuff. We can also have all these here, but for our development purpose, we can only have HTML and JS. Until and unless it's required, you can have here. So let's talk about HTML. HTML, which is nothing but like how we have a Visual Force page, Apex page, root tag, as well as in the Lightning component, we have Aura component. Same thing in the LWC, we have a something called root tag called template, which is nothing but if you already have worked in any of the frameworks on any of the native languages, you might have already seen this template tag. So what we have in the JS, let's open JS. So if you already discussed about like having the custom elements and importing all the stuff. So if you see, LWC is the Salesforce provider's inbuilt functionality, and through this statement, import lightning element is the variable I'm having here from LWC, which is LWC is a Salesforce standard package. They are having all the standards, all the, we don't need to build each and every code for this. We just import here, and this will have a lightning element. So previously in 2014 times, we don't have any class in the to develop in the JavaScript. So in earlier days of 2019, they have introduced this class having in the JavaScript, and here I'm exporting a class, and these two are keywords and class. This is my class name, like how I have for lightning component, and extends my lightning element. So this will have all the basics of where I can leverage the Salesforce standard providing inbuilt features. So let's talk about this. And now I just have a JS file. So this is, I didn't even create any of these files. Salesforce will take care of this to create HTML or to create JS. So now I just want to print a hello world message to our clients. So I'm declaring a variable here, greeting message. Hello all, welcome to the world of LWC. So that's it. So now I want to use this, like if you remember in the lightning component VF page, we have to, in the VF page, we have to use getter setter. In the lightning component, we have to use value provider. So if I want to print this message in the UI, simply use data binding expressions. If you recall in the lightning component, we're having data binding expressions, and let's have the same variable, whatever you declared here, and that's it. So to see this, I have to deploy this to my org. Before I have to deploy, I just created for demo purpose, I just created one application. So this is my application. Sorry, hello world. Yeah, and I copied this, I save this, and now what I need to do is, so all of your changes, whatever you have done, it's still resides in your local. It's not even deployed to your org. Now what you need to do? So first, where is my lightning component? Here. So right click on this component, and if you do see here, deploy source to your org. Let's click on this. And this will take a couple of seconds. So this will run a command behind the scene. So you can even deal with a command or okay. For time being, I'm just not running out here. I already created one component here. I deployed to my org. So if you see here, let me open the component which I created here. So this is let's not bother about this. See this greeting message, and I just concatenated. I just added one hello message here, and I'm using the same message in my HTML. That's it. I'm not doing anything here. So that will render up you here. So this is how you will declare a variables, and you will be using these variables in your Aura component. So now Praveen showed you like one quick demo, like whenever you're changing in the input, it's auto reflecting in your uh, screen underneath that. So that is something called value provider and data binding. So Lightning, unfortunately, Lightning component, Lightning web component will not support that. To do support for that, you have to write your own code. So before that, let me give you an overview on here. What is properties we're having in LWC? So there are two types of properties we have in Lightning web component. One is public and private. Underneath private, we have like a track. So track was currently deprecated in the latest release, so which is already reactive, and API. So let's see, whatever I declared the variables here. So this greeting is a reactive property. That's why whenever you added a text, it's get reflected in your HTML, right? So this is a reactive property, and I didn't declare any of thing here. I didn't even declare track. So previously we need to declare as a track. So Salesforce is currently supporting even the local variables as reactive properties. So you don't need to bother about the decorator here. And yeah, that's it. I just rendered a greeting message here. Now let's get back to our old scenario where whenever I'm typing here in this input, whenever I'm typing here, I need to render the same message underneath that. So like how Praveen demoed to you in the Lightning component, if at all you want to achieve that, what you need to do is, so let me show you. This is the Lightning input. As I said earlier, we having standard components where you don't need to bother, or you don't need to write single piece of code. You just simply use that particular tag. So Lightning input is the component provided by Salesforce. So I'm giving the label, and I'm just providing the required. So this is the same standard native HTML development, and I'm having something called on change. So what I'm doing is, whenever this text was typed or whenever the text was changing. So yeah, this is the method is calling up. Let me check. Yeah, this is the method is calling up. So yeah, we have as we already discussed, or where, as we already seen about few slides, we have something called events. So these are standard events provided by the browser. So I'm having event.target.value. What it will do is it's getting the value whatever I'm typing from the input box and assign into the text, just a reactive property variable which is input text. And with this I'm rendering over here. Let's not bother about this up for now. So this is the variable I'm just using. So unlike like lightning component, you don't need to provide any value providers. You just simply within the expressions, you will be providing your variable name. So if you do see here in the on change itself, I'm not even calling like how we do in the lightning component. So I'm not calling with the c dot method name. I'm just calling a method and without any double quotes here. If you do see here, I'm just giving an expression, and then inside the expression I'm providing the method name. So render message is my method, and here I'm having a Salesforce browser standard event. I'm getting the current type value and I'm assigning to the input text variable. So this input text is the something where which resides here. So that's why whenever I'm typing here, the value whatever I'm passing here will get call over here on each and every button click, on each and every key press. This method will get called and it will gets reflect assigned to the input text, and it will render over our DOM. So this is called reactive property. So whenever you make changes, that will automatically auto renders here. You don't need to write any of the code to change this. And so let's back to our slide. So now, so far we have seen how to declare a variables and how we can render a messages and structure of a lightning web component. So now the most important thing is you want to invoke your Apex class, which is nothing but a server. Okay, how you can call your Apex class from the LWC? There are two ways of invoking Apex class from the LWC. One is called wire property or wire decorator, and another one is imperative. So let's see this. So here in my JS, if at all you are using any of the decorators like this, like either wire or API decorator, so you have to first import those here. Then only you are able to access these. If at all you are not importing here, you will see exception here itself. So supported decorators should be imported from LWC. So now I imported a wire decorator here, which is nothing but a decorator where you can directly call the server and you don't need to write any of the code. So now what we need to do is I imported a wire attribute. So now I declare, let me open one of my Apex class, which I already written, which is a demo class. So you can even create Apex class from here itself. So I created an Apex class, and here, like if at all you are invoking your lightning component, you have to mention at or enabled decorator here, and then only you can able to invoke your lightning component method from the lightning component lightning webcom. Same like lightning component, you have to add the or enabled decorator here, and I'm just written a get contacts method which will querying the list of contacts in my org and limiting to 10. So now what I'm using here is let me jump back to my demo. So here the power of extension, which I already told you, like this Salesforce lightning code snippets. You don't need to remember all the code. If you add this extension, it will automatically add show you the syntax or sample code. Let's see this. So I want to call a Apex method using the decorator wire. So just add wire here. So if you see here, there are, it listed out so many methods standardly. So what is wire data? And if you see here, there is something called wire with param and without param. For our demo purpose, I'm just using without param. So let's click on this. So it will give you the syntax. You don't need to write, you don't need to remember all the code. So that is the power of that extension. You don't need to remember code. So here, if you see, it accepts a method name, and this is just simple a variable name or method name, whatever you can even call. So these two are callbacks. So this is error callback, and this is success callback, success variable. So what if you have any error in your server callback, it will get over to here. So that's why if you see here, there is something called else if, whatever the value, or if at all you have any error, this will get over to here. And if you have any success, it will add over here. So as long as I already have a method, so yeah, now we have wire decorator syntax. Now I want to invoke my Apex class, whatever I have written here, use from Lightning Web Component. So for that, again, you have to use import statement. So let's type here import. If you type here import itself, that will prompt you list of collections already we have. Import Salesforce Apex. I think, yeah. So if you type IMP, this is having with IMP, and Salesforce Apex class. So there is something called Salesforce Apex class. Let's click on this. It will give you the syntax. You don't need to remember all the stuff. So this is the variable, how you are importing the lightning element. You have to use the same variable, like the same, you have to use the one variable. And here, this is the syntax you have to invoke your Apex class. At Salesforce is extension Apex. This is the controller name. And this is your method name. In our example, so if I already have the code here, so this is the method I have to call. So from this Apex class, demo class is my Apex class, get contacts is my Apex method. So I'm importing the same here. So now my entire import statements is underneath this. So I have to pass this get contacts to the my wire service. So let's have the same example, get contacts. I'm using the same variable, whatever I'm having here. And I'm just assigning the success callback and error callback, and I'm just printing the result here, and I'm just printing the error here. So whenever you're just you have to keep in mind, whenever you're dealing with at wire service, whatever the Apex class whatever the Apex method you are using, it should be catchable equal to true. Means that when whatever you are returning here, you shouldn't manipulate anything over here. So that's why you have to give catchable equal to true, and you cannot or you shouldn't make any changes after this success callback. So let me quickly show you this. So here, yeah, this is my result. After this is whenever you have returned contacts, this will get over here. You couldn't modify any of the data, whatever you're having here, whenever you're dealing with a wire service. So what I'm doing here is now I need to render all these contacts in my UI. So that's why I created one reactive property here, which is a local variable, or you can even call, and I'm assigning the data, whatever I'm returning to result variable. So let's go to the HTML. So whatever Praveen showed previously with the Aura iteration, we do have same thing kind of for each in the Lightning Web Component. It accepts only two parameters. The syntax should be like this: template and for each, and here it accepts the list of collection, list or collection, and for item is iterator. So this is simply looks like this for like what we used to do in the Apex, right? CON. This is my list of contacts. Okay, contact list. So same thing here. Contact list is nothing but here my result, and CON is nothing but here my contact. So this is iterating. I'm iterating through all my contacts, and I'm having the local variable. And another thing we have to remember here is the key. Whenever you're dealing with the template for each, and whenever you're using iterator here, you have to provide the key, because as long as you remember, Salesforce LWC deals with, it is more reactive and more interactive. So whenever you're changing a separate value in this list item, it will not refresh the entire list. So let's say I'm having list of 10 items. I change it in the 5th index position, 5th item from my list. So what LWC will deal here is, it will not again change the or iterate through entire collection to change the value. Like let's say I'm having name as training 1. So after that, some on button click, I change it to training 2. Salesforce will not, LWC will not iterate through all the list to change this training 2. So it will directly update this training 2 with help of this key. So that's why you have to, this is a mandatory whenever you're using template. So you have to provide the key here. And here I'm just listing out the contact ID, and let's see this output here. So I already deployed one application here. So I'm rendering this lightning component using lightning application. So this is my code previously. Yeah. So this is my demo LWC lightning web component I'm using in the Aura application, and I'm previewing over here. So that's it. So let me get back to this. Yeah. So here I'm iterating through all my list of elements. This is, I'm having only contact ID here. I didn't even print any of the name or email. So if you see here, the wire method is called, let me refresh this. Here we go. I'm bringing all the contacts and with a limit of 10, and this rendering using lightning template for each. So I have a console here too. If at all, if you have any exceptions, so if you see, I printed a console for array. So whatever we are getting the data. So you can simply see over here. This I'm returning list of contacts here. So this way you can even simply call Apex without writing much code in Lightning web component level. So as we see previously, we do see two types of server invocations from Lightning web component. One is why, so far we did see that, and now another one is imperative. So you want to manipulate some data which is written by Salesforce, which is written by your Apex method. How can you develop your code, or how can you call your server using imperative method? So same thing. Let me go back to my Apex class. So here I developed another method called get accounts, and you don't need to provide catchable equal to true because you're not calling from wire service. This should only required when you're calling from wire service. And here I'm querying the list of accounts and limiting to 5. I'm just returning the list of accounts. Let me back to the JS. Like how we did for the contacts. So you want to import the contact, same way you want to import the accounts too. So whatever the method you're invoking, you should import that. So I'm having demo class, and underneath that I'm having get accounts method. So with this get accounts method, I'm importing into one variable. So here, this is the variable. Okay. So what I'm doing here is, whenever on click of this button, I want to query accounts in my org with limit of 5. On load of the page, we are rendering only contacts. Now on click of the button, I need to render only accounts. So here we go. If you see the ID, it starts with 001, which is account ID. So how I'm doing here? So for that, as I told you, like previously, we have a lightning, one of the component is lightning button. It's a standard inbuilt component. You don't need to you don't need to write any of the code to handle this. Just whatever the required parameters here, I'm passing label as get accounts, and I have on click. So unlike HTML, you shouldn't need to pass any method name to with double quotes. You can simply within the curly brace, you just simply call your Apex method. So that will invoke your method. So I'm having query accounts method. Whenever you click on this button, this gets called. So let's see this method. So this is my button click method, query accounts. So whenever I click on this get accounts, this is gets called. Here, if you remember, I imported get accounts into the get accounts variable. It don't need to be the same name. What is your Apex method name? You can call any, you can write any, you can give any name to your import method. So I'm having get accounts here. So what I'm doing here is, so the same like how I showed you for the wire, let's have the same code with the extension. So you have to call Apex method using imperative. So type Apex. So if you see in the list, which is suggesting by extension, Apex with param, Apex without param. In the right hand side, if you see LWC Apex imperative. So I need to call the method using imperative method. So for now, I'm dealing with only without params. You can even pass your params. So that's it. It will give you the method name. You can, this one you need to replace, and it will give you the success callback if at all, if your result don't have any exception, this will get called. Like this is like a then function you might have already heard about in one of our native JavaScript languages, and this is catch. I think we are running late, but apologies for that, but I'm trying to cover a few things. Another one is catch. So if at all you have any exceptions, this will get called here. So what you need to do is you just simply add get accounts here. So what I need to do, replace this with get accounts. I'm sorry, I think I didn't copy this. And let's have this. Get accounts. That's it. This will get, if at all you have success block, this is the result is the variable which holds the success of your methods. And I'm assigning to the result variable. I think you can get rid of this too. I already prepared a few things. So this is my method, and the result I'm assigning to the result variable, which is already a reactive property. And error so far like so in the constructor wise, in the page load, this method will gets called. Then we are assigning the result to the contact list here. On button click, I'm assigning the same result to the same variable. That's why you are not seeing the contacts on page load. I'm refreshing again. Here you see the ID, it starts with 003, which is contact ID. Whenever I click on button, I'm again invoking imperative method, and I'm calling my Apex class, and I'm getting the accounts. If you see, it's changed with 001, which is nothing but account ID. It's a Salesforce standard ID key prefix, and that's it. So this is how you can easily interact with server. You don't need to bother about no code, or you don't need to remember all the syntax. With the help of extensions, you can simply play with this. So far we covered how to interact with the server. So now we retrieve the data from the Salesforce. How can I create or how can I manipulate data in the Salesforce, right? So for now, I'm not going to the code for now. I'm just rendering, showing the demo. So I created one tab here, and I just added one component. So if you guys recall, Praveen showed us using lightning recorded form to create records without any help of Apex class. So I'm using the same. Let me create one account here. Demo training account 2. I'm creating an account here. See, the account is created. Let me back to the account. So here we go. Account is created with the name, whatever we have. You can even find here, I'm populating the ID after the created record ID. So I'm creating this record using the data service, which I already talked about in my earlier slides, which is one of the powerful tool in the Salesforce. You don't need to write any of your Apex class. So you can create your records. You can even get records from the data service itself. And yeah, so if you guys recall in the last slides of Praveen, he's explaining a few things about how to communicate between the events. So you want, let's say you want to communicate between the child components or sibling components, or which are not even having any relationship. So we do have the same thing in the LWC. So if at all, if the component is in the containment hierarchy, like parent is, child is inside the parent component, and if it is in the containment hierarchy, you can use methods like how Praveen showed. The same method, you can call the child methods from the parent itself. So how I want to communicate with the parent from the child component. So you can use custom event, which is a Salesforce, which is browser standard events concept, and you can use the same events to communicate with the parents. So now you want to communicate between two components, which two components don't have any relationship. So that's where it's publish subscriber model, which we used to call pub/sub model, which already Praveen like discussed in his lightning component session with application event, which is nothing but application event lightning component. Here we used to call pub/sub model. So with this way, we can even communicate with the events. I think, yeah. Before I conclude this, if at all you're facing any difficulties while setting up all this stuff, and you want to play with the lightning web component without setting up all this stuff, we Salesforce providing few things. Yeah. So here we go. And I'm simply, apologize for running late, guys. I'll quickly wrap up within 2 minutes. So type Lightning web component library here. So you can click on the first one, which is Salesforce official documentation. Here you can find all the standard all the standard components which I was talking about. Like we have 70 plus components. If you do see, we have two sections: Lightning web component and Aura. So you can find all the tabs here. Let's say we discussed about Lightning button, right? If you remember. So if you click on this, here it will give you an example. What is the syntax of button? How you can play with this? What is the great with our Salesforce is it will even allowing us to here make changes directly without even saving it. So let's see, there is button called base right here. I'm changing this to demo button. See this? It's changing directly here. So Salesforce documentation is that much powerful. You don't need to remember all the code, and you don't need to directly play in the component itself. You can play here itself. So this is one area, and you can see the JavaScript of this too. Whenever, let's say, you click on any button, this method will get called. You can find all the standard Salesforce supporting tags here, and same thing like how Praveen showed, we have the same Aura tags here too. Now, if you want to start developing development of Lightning web component, navigate to the developer guide. Here you have all the official documentation of the Lightning web component. Just go with this Lightning web component documentation. You will have full maximum of knowledge and or maximum overview what is Lightning web component. And there is something called Locker console. This we are not currently talking about. This is another interesting thing in the Salesforce documentation is playground. So this is where you don't need to create any setup in your Visual Studio Code. You can simply add your code here itself. Salesforce will take care of this playground. That's why the name tab itself is having a playground. So let's see this. Having welcome to the Lightning Web Components playground. I'm changing this. Where is this? Where is this? Here we go. Welcome. Sorry, I think this is having in the title. Let's have right JavaScript here, right? I'm changing this. Welcome to the sorry for the typos, world of LWC. See, on type itself, how the component reference is changing, it will reflect automatically here. And you can even download your samples, and you can even run this from here, and you can save these samples with connection of your org. And you can even add your own components here directly. So before you're giving a try from the setting up of all the stuff, give a try from the playground, and let's explore whatever we're having in the Salesforce, and then you can start using from the Visual Studio Code. And lastly, so far we've seen like we have Visual Force Page, Lightning component and Lightning web component. Lightning web component has a certain limited features where it's not fully supporting, like it's a newborn baby for the Salesforce. So you want to understand the Lightning web component, Lightning component. If at all you are not going to achieve with the Lightning web component, you can achieve the same thing in Lightning component. Whenever you're solutioning this, you have to understand the Lightning component too. So few constraints in the Lightning component too. Few things we can't even achieve with the Lightning component. So that you need to know about Visual Force Page too. That's why we had a full pack of Lightning VF Page, Lightning web component. So as a developer, you should know all these. But so far, like most of our clients is getting requirement only using the Lightning web component. So try to start playing with this. And with that, I think I can conclude my session. Thanks for staying late and listening very patiently to us. And I would like to thank you all guys and listening to us in the Sunday, and you're spending your full weekend with us. Thank you guys. Apologies for the running late. Yeah.
Thank you, Yashwant. Let us, before concluding the session, let us have the remaining poll questions.
Sure, Sekhar.
Can you see the poll?
Yes, Shekhar. So here we go, guys. Kind of quick quiz. How many types of flow are there in the Salesforce? 1, 2, 3. 39% only voted still now.
Let us give 45 seconds.
Yeah. Last 5 seconds. Ravin, you would like to reveal the answer?
The answer is 2.
You went with majority. Okay. Next question, please, Shekhar.
Yeah.
Is it possible to invoke Apex code from Flow?
30 seconds.
Wow. 88% answered.
Praveen?
Praveen?
Yeah. Yes, the answer is true.
Super. Next question, please, Shekhar.
Yes.
What is the size of view state? Wow, it's my question. $135 KB or $165 KB? $77% voted. I think you can end this question, Shekhar. I'll go with the same majority too.
Yeah, okay.
What are the events present in the Lightning component? Component event, application event, user event, system event.
Five more seconds.
Praveen?
Praveen?
The answer is component event and application event.
Yeah. Two winners.
Okay. The last question.
What are the properties available in Lightning Web component? Wire, track, API, all of the above. I'm not sure.
Ten more seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all.
Okay. Once again, thank you all. Thank you, SoftSquare, all the presenters, and all the participants. Wish you all success. Thank you. Please register for the free event on Tuesday. That is on Tableau. You will get the notifications. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Stay safe and spend your time with your family. Bye-bye.